Good morning and welcome to our September 22nd City Council work session. At this time, I'll ask Tara to call the roll.
Okay. Turner.
Yes.
Fire Robin.
Here.
King.
Here.
Okay, sorry.
It didn't work that time, Tim.
Here. And Luttrell.
Yes, here.
Thank you.
Mr. Soar, if you would introduce our staff and other guests, please.
Yes, Mayor, be glad to. We have a number of guests with us as well as staff in attendance today, and they may not all be on the line at the present. We have a rather lengthy agenda, and we're going to contact some of our guests as we approach their time on the agenda so that they're not in here for a protracted period of time. From a staff standpoint, we have Danielle Smith, City Attorney. We have Tara Music, City Recorder and Director of Finance. Tim Beavers, Director of Development Services. Sheriff Young, Planning Services Manager. Terry Napier, Director of Parks and Recreation. Tom Anderson, Economic Development Director. John Luttrell, Director of Community Relations. Shane Varney, IT Director. And Mike Carrier will be joining us later as, and obviously he is our fire chief. Guests today, we have Dr. Rachel Walk with Bristol, Tennessee City Schools, and she'll be first on the agenda. We also have Bill Sumner, who is the chairman of the board of directors for Network Sullivan Partnership. Clay Walker, CEO of Network Sullivan Partnership. We also have Phil Thomason, who will be with us as a consultant with Phil Thomason and Associates regarding our historic design guidelines. And then lastly, we have Jim Bean, and he might even be joining us from the field. He's on, I guess, an incident right now, and will be joining us to talk about the hazard mitigation plan. If he can't be there, then I'll cover it. So, Mayor, back to you.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'd like to ask our attorney, Ms. Smith, to go over the necessity for conducting an electronic meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. As you guys have all heard me say before, we are currently in a period when the governor has suspended certain provisions of the Open Meetings Act to the extent that it's allowable for governing bodies to meet electronically rather than being required to gather physically in the same location. One condition of meeting electronically is that if a member of council or staff is attending by audio only, that is, there is no video that shows who's speaking, you're asked to identify yourself by name and position when you speak. In order to proceed with meeting electronically, the governing body should make a determination that meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. So at this time, it would be appropriate for the members to discuss, if they need discussion, whether they believe that it is necessary to meet electronically in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans. If you don't have any discussion, then you can proceed to a roll call vote and determine whether you are going to meet electronically.
Any discussion? Okay, Tara, please call the roll.
Turner.
Yes.
Fire Robin.
Yes.
King.
Yes.
Powers.
Yes.
Luttrell.
Yes. Okay, we'll move on into the agenda items. At this time, I would like to ask Ms. Walk to discuss the request for the moratorium on state standardized testing.
All right, thank you. And again, my name is Rachel Walk, and I'm speaking today on behalf of Dr. Annette Tudor and the Bristol, Tennessee City School System. And we appreciate the time to get to speak with you this morning. So thank you for adding us to your agenda. This morning, what I wanted to share with you is a resolution that our school board passed last night at the monthly school board meeting. And it is in regard to state standardized testing for our students. And we are asking that the city council and the county commission pass something similar to this resolution as well. And at this time, I would like to read the resolution to you, and then I can answer any questions after that. This is a moratorium on state standardized testing for the 2020-2021 school year. Whereas coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19, is a global pandemic that can lead to serious illness or death and spreads through close contact among individuals. And whereas beginning on March 12, 2020, Governor Bill Lee declared Tennessee to be in a state of emergency until June 30th, 2020, pursuant to Executive Orders 14 and 36 due to COVID-19. And whereas beginning on March 16th, 2020, Tennessee schools were closed for the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year in response to requests made by Governor Bill Lee, and they closed to combat the spread of COVID-19. And whereas on March 18th, 2020, the Tennessee General Assembly approved the cancellation of state standardized testing for the 2019-2020 school year due to the statewide closure of schools and subsequent lack of standardized instruction being delivered to students. And whereas on June 22nd, 2020, the Tennessee State Board of Education approved Emergency Rule 0520-01-17-.01, which requires Tennessee school districts to provide students in grades 1 through 12 access to 6.5 hours of instruction time each school day during the 2020-2021 school year, even if there are school closures or disruptions related to outbreaks of COVID-19. And whereas by Executive Order 50, signed by Governor Bill Lee, the state of Tennessee is to remain in a state of emergency until at least September 30th, 2020, and COVID-19 continues to spread at rapid rate in Tennessee. And whereas Tennessee schools, in order to comply with state board requirements, will likely have to engage in remote learning in whole or in part during the 2020-2021 academic school year to the continued spread of COVID-19. And whereas pursuant to State Board Emergency Rule 0520-01-17-.01, Tennessee school districts are required to each create and implement their own plans to facilitate continuous learning in light of the continued spread of COVID-19. And whereas Tennessee school districts will be implementing different plans for learning from county to county across the state for 2020-2021 based on the needs of their students and COVID-19 outbreaks in each county. And whereas Tennessee students will likely face significant academic and behavioral regression upon returning to school and having lost approximately 2 months of standard instruction and attendance due to the extended closure. Whereas schools returned in August 2020, students spent approximately 5 consecutive months out of school. And whereas Tennessee school districts will be focused not only on student growth and safety, but also on recoupment of academic and social and emotional skills lost during the extended closure. And now, therefore, be it resolved on this 21st day of September 2020 by the Bristol, Tennessee Board of Education that Bristol, Tennessee City Schools supports and respectfully requests a moratorium on state standardized testing and accountability associated with such testing for the 2020-2021 school year, to include end-of-year examinations, end-of-course exams, and formative assessments throughout the year. The Bristol, Tennessee Board of Education requests that if state standardized testing does continue in some format for the 2020-21 school year, the results of that testing be used as metrics of student progress rather than to determine district rankings and scoring statewide, and not count towards student grades or teacher and administrator evaluations due to the disparity in learning methods that will be used across the state in light of COVID-19, and 2, resources available to each district in the state of Tennessee, and 3, internet access available to the student populations across the state. Such a moratorium would permit school districts to focus on recoupment of students' academic and social and emotional skills lost during the extended school closure and the safety and welfare of students. So that is the resolution that was passed last night by our board. And again, asking that the city council consider passing something similar for all the reasons that were mentioned there for our students and our teachers. Does anyone have any questions about any aspect of the resolution that I just read?
I'd like to point out, it's my understanding that the Sullivan County Commission will also be considering this resolution during their October session.
Thank
Is there
you.
any loss of funding with this from the state? Because I'm assuming the state has not, we're just passing, I mean, you're asking for this resolution, but would there be, with suspending this, will there be any loss of funding or anything I mean, what's the state stand on this?
Well, as of right now, the state is planning for us to move forward with state testing. And we're not asking necessarily for the state testing to be eliminated, but we just don't want it to be used for student grades or for teacher and administrator evaluations. Currently, state testing is tied to both of those. So we're asking for this year for that not to be the case. So to my knowledge, there's no issues with funding in this situation. A few years ago, when the state had difficulty with online testing, they did something similar to this where they did not hold that against teachers or students, the results. And
Right.
so this is very similar to that year as well.
I think the fact that it's a resolution requesting the state legislature to take action on this, that it is a reasonable request given the circumstances and the interruption in traditional education. And I agree that it would be something that, as the state has demonstrated in the past, they have done, and where funding was not tied to it. So in doing this, we are agreeing with our school board and are in lockstep that this resolution be submitted to the state legislature for their consideration. This by no means is an action on our part. It's simply the request of an action.
I agree. I think that for us to do a resolution supporting that resolution would be great.
Yeah, I do as well. You would think that the legislatures are probably thinking this way themselves, or at least you would hope they would be, with everything that's been going on, all the distractions and interruptions. And hopefully they'll be very sympathetic towards this. Yes, I believe we could support that as well.
So, Mr. Sora, what's the process for?
I'll have this placed on your October 6th agenda for consideration. We'll take the draft resolution, put it in our format, and have it placed on your agenda on October 6th.
Is there anyone that feels strongly that this isn't something that we should do? I'm just curious.
No, I feel that we should do it as well.
No, I just had the question of going through with it so yeah, no, I'm fine.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Walk.
Thank you, Mayor Luttrell. I appreciate the opportunity to get to speak with you, and we appreciate your consideration very much and all you do. Thank you.
Before Dr. Walk leaves, are there any other updates from the school system that would be good for us to hear?
Well, last night at our school board, we celebrated teachers. We weren't able to do that at the end of the school year due to the closure. So lots of celebrations last night for our teachers of the year, teacher ambassadors, teacher advisory. Also last night, our school board and Dr. Tudor announced that we will be bringing our secondary students back full-time every day. That's middle and high school students. Currently, they are on a stagger hybrid schedule. They come attend 2 days, and then the other 3 days they are remote. And so now if parents and students chose the in-person option, they will actually get to come for 5 days. And this will begin the Tuesday after fall break. So we're excited that everyone's going to have the opportunity to be back and be learning on site full time. We will continue to offer the remote option for both elementary and secondary students for those parents and students who have chosen that. So this is for our students who have chosen on-site learning.
So I assume if you've chosen on site, but you're quarantined, because I know everything's being very careful, then you can access the remote while you're quarantined.
Yeah, yes, we have made arrangements. And, currently we've got our teachers who are serving both remote and on-site learners simultaneously or synchronously. And that's another reason for us having the request that the state testing not be tied to evaluations and student grades.
Thanks.
All those.
Okay, any more questions for Dr. Walk? Okay, again, thank you for presenting today, and it's always good seeing you.
It's great to see you too, Mayor Lynchell. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item, and that's Network Solar Partnership discussion of regionalism initiative.
Yes, Mayor.
Okay.
Today with us, we have Bill Sumner, who's chair of the Networks Sullivan Partnership Board of Directors, and Clay Walker, the CEO. Tim's going to be driving the PowerPoint for them, and that's up on the screen now. So, Clay, would you and Bill like to, either one of you like to proceed?
Yeah, and thank you, Bill. Thanks all you guys for inviting us. I'm not sure we didn't invite ourselves, but that's okay too. Thanks for having us. I'm going to start off and then talk a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish, what we've been trying to accomplish. Then I'll hand it over to Clay and go through some numbers and things. Don't know how much you guys time you wanted to spend, but Clay and I talked about it. We really just want to have more discussion with you than anything else. So we'll go through these charts real quick and just a couple of things. So a little history, if you go back to July 2018, we had a strategic planning session. Some of you guys were there. Thought we had a wonderful event. I thought we all worked together, came up with some ideas, which we'll talk about in just a second. And you can see the rest of this. The rest is kind of where are we now. So if you get over to the right side, where are we now is where we've been working now for a little over 2 years, actually a little more longer than that, I think, to get this regionalism concept in front of our goal. My goal has been to get a workable solution or a workable proposition in front of the appropriate boards, meaning Kingsport City Council, Bristol City Council, Sullivan County Commission, so that we could enjoy the advantages of a regional organization as we have discussed, both we have discussed as a networks organization and as other people apparently around us have discussed for a long time. One of those things, there's scale and making better opportunity of the employees we have and the resources we have. So that's been the thinking, is to get this put together in a feasible plan. And that's what this timeline is about, and that's really what it tracks. Go on to the next chart, please. So this was the outcome of that strategic meeting, which I really love this because from an engineering standpoint, you love to show things with pictures. That's what we do. We draw pictures all the time. I want to draw your attention over the right side of this, and this is kind of where we are right now. I just looked back at this yesterday and thought it was really kind of cool, because if you look there where it says working in the region, first thing above it says this is hard. and lots of different opinions, regionalism. And even if you look over on the right side, if you guys remember the little offsite we had over at the Bank of Tennessee building, the trust. See, that requires deep trust. We talked a lot about trust, getting the right leaders, getting the right share of stakeholders. All this stuff's really kind of cool that we did this as a networks group, a little over 2 years ago. We kind of came up and realized all this over on the left is the stuff we talked about what we wanted to do, what we thought we needed to do on workforce and lands. And this is how we came out of that meeting with the action to go do what we're doing. So that's really where we are right now, is we're over on the right side trying to do all those things. And go to the next chart, please. And then Clay's going to talk a little about, and Clay's going to run through it pretty quick. So I guess you guys stop him if you need anything. But really, the next 2 or 3 charts are about, why are we doing this and why does it make sense? And with that, Clay. You'll mute, Clay.
We're running simultaneously with our efforts. Of course, a lot of other people were meeting, and a lot of, I guess, chatter around and hearing things through the grapevine about how are we doing, not just in job recruitment, but population growth. So just taking a look at quick numbers, something y'all are pretty familiar with. If you look at the population of our cities and our MSAs and the CSA, of course, we have a rather large population as a CSA that could compare to a lot of other places that we might not be looked at as being quite as big and with the attributes that come with a larger city. If we look one more, Tim, and this just breakdown of our county population, which hasn't had a lot of growth over the last few years, but it has been a bit of an uptick in the growth. And then if we look at other MSAs, again, I pulled Lexington because I had an uncle who lived in Lexington, and I had a cousin visiting me, and my uncle made a remark about kind of going to a small place. And I said, let them know that our MSA is or CSA is pretty much the same as Lexington's. And you see some others on there that we've done some comparisons with, nothing real significant about them. But I think you look at some that I've worked with and been familiar with that were larger than Ocala, Florida. And Ocala just happens that a real good friend of mine is the economic development chief down there. And they've certainly done a really good job of how they've come together. But it's, just be frank, I think that Bill mentioned on that planning slide about this being hard. It is, when we've got to pull together 3 very independent, very distinct cities to equal this CSA that we have, as compared to these others have in common one central obvious place that everything can rally around. So if we go forward, this is just, again, kind of putting it in comparison. If you look at the through a bar chart, but you can see how our CSAs, if we look at numbers and go together, they really start stacking up favorably to some other well-known MSAs or CSAs. And if we look one more, again, this is just kind of population, how it's grown. And if you look at Nashville, they've added counties into their MSA, which is always helpful. But I mean, they've had over the past 20 years or so, just really unprecedented growth. And a lot of the discussion that started that was frustrating is they were comparing our region, some were comparing our region to Nashville, and Nashville's an anomaly. I mean, it really is. So if we just move forward. So why do regionalism? Some of the real obvious points are a singular voice, a united voice for attracting things. Just so happens that the races weekend, I spoke to a Republican candidate and front runner to replace Phil Rowe, Diana Harshberger. And she mentioned how important it would be for her to know from one voice what we're wanting, what we're looking for. Singular point of contact for traditional economic development projects. I think most of you, if not all of you, were in our meeting a couple of weeks ago, and where a story was relayed about Commissioner Rolfe being in favor of networks were to represent the whole region on projects. And so there certainly is some advantage to that continuity. We're working a project right now, which looking at all three Tri-Cities, to where the client asked that we be the sole regional point of contact. And I've been in communications with Tom Anderson on this project just today. And again, the main bang for the buck too, we get in this in the discussion, but a lot of what we do was going to spill over and benefit the entire region. Our red carpet tour, for example, has generated projects that won't just look at Sullivan County. When they come to look, they're going to look at buildings and sites anywhere in this region. So it's kind of a mindset of if what we do or what any group does benefits others, why not share in the expense of that? And again, a focus on the population growth, which I think is really a regional effort that could be handled regional. It's a little outside of our scope, but I think it's important to mention that's come up time and time again. And of course, consistency in how we sell ourselves. We all sell, no matter how many EDOs we have in this region, we all put forth the same numbers. We all sell the region because that's where the workforce is. And that's where when you live here, you're certainly not bound by any borders to where you can't, if you live in Kingsport, you can, and people do, go shopping at the Pinnacle, go to movies in that theater, go to the races, go enjoy an adult beverage on State Street. We all go around and enjoy the whole region. So we market the whole region, but it's consistency in how we market it, just a little more collaborative effort. So we go forward, Tim, please. And that brings to the end, and we could, I don't think there's a need to share the screen now. I mean, that's just a background background on the background. Kingsport asked us to put this together when we spoke to them a few weeks ago, and we wanted the same information to be shared with all our partners. But we know some of the discussion is the same, but there are little differences in how city leaders view these things. So Commissioner Sumner, or I'm making you commissioner.
Captain's fine.
Captain Sumner, my captain, my spiritual advisor, Mr. Sumner, and I'm here to answer any questions that you'd like to engage us in.
I think one of the reasons we wanted to have this on the agenda, certainly as Bill Sumner indicated earlier, they asked to be about a month or so to go to all of the respective governing bodies and have this conversation about regionalism. But up until this point, the governing bodies have not had an opportunity collectively to have a dialogue with the network's representatives, either the CEO or the chairman. So this gives City Council an opportunity to provide feedback and just give their thoughts as to where to go as to where to go forward with the regionalism initiative.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in. Probably about 3 meetings ago, there was a comment made that, we've been at this for 2 years now, or a little over 2 years, and we're where we started. So at that time, I think my comment was that, well, isn't that telling us something? What's your take on that, Bill? Clay?
Clay, I'll go first. I'll go back to that chart that says it's hard. Is one of the things that we keep in 2 things. It's hard is in that you've got so many different opinions, and then the second, probably the hardest thing is really trust. And I'm pretty open, honest guy. you know, there's been a lot of things happening in the last few years regionally that I think have not been handled well. And I think everybody would agree, almost everybody agrees to that. And as far as some of the things that have happened with, you know, companies in the region, things like that. And it's made for an environment where they really there has to be some give on really on both sides, but maybe one side has to give a little more first, and that's sort of, you know, that's so and I agree with you, Malin, and that I think I may have made that comment. But if I didn't, I know I've made it before. We've been trying to push really hard to get to an actionable, you know, point where we actually have a good proposal on the table that's got details in it, where you guys can see what you're, you know, what are you being offered? What's the offer here? What does Bristol have to gain? What's Kingsport have to gain? What does the region have to gain? How are we going to grow jobs? How are we going to grow businesses? How does this really help? And frankly, we just struggled to get there. We've been stuck in the relationship part of this still, I think, maybe the best way to say it. I think what I've been doing most recently is telling, you know, Will and NetRep and the other folks and the consultants we got working with us, guys, we really need to get moving. We need to see, I think all the stakeholders really, Mark Vance said it for the county. Mark said it for the county when he said, what's in it for, you know, why are we doing this? That's where we are right now. And that's unfortunately, that's probably also the hardest thing to get. It's almost like, got a friend of mine, a lawyer, that says, you know, you don't want to be the first liar. You want to be you want to answer the first liar. So it's which one, who steps out first. And so I think what directly in answer to what you're saying is, I really think it's time for you guys, and I've told the same thing Kingsport people, you know, you know what your wants are, and I know you guys want to represent the community. You want to get the best for your stakeholders. So it's really time for us to say, I think, and that works to say, not necessarily as a board, maybe it's by individual boards. What is it you guys would find that would work, and that would, you know, what would convince you to do the right, you know, to do this, that's the right thing for you and the taxpayers? Because that's what we've got to do right now. That's a long-winded answer, but I think I kind of went all around it and hopefully answered some other questions there.
And I agree with my top two answers would have also reflected back to that it is hard, and the trust issue. You know, I think that Lee Powers at a meeting we had in June, a collective meeting of our stakeholders and net reps, toward the end of the meeting, Lee, you talked about trust. And the first when I heard that, just to be frank, I was like, you know, we've been doing this for a bit. Are we still on that? And again, just to speak frankly, the last several weeks have shown that I think we are, and we have some things to get past. A lot of things have gone on here that we just haven't was clicked with NetRep's vision, and they not with ours. We had and we need to talk about an MOU that was circulated, that was sent to that we talked about at our board meeting, and our board chose not to act until we got more feedback, because it was clear none of our investors in the room were satisfied that the MOU said what needed to be said that what we were comfortable with signing on to. And Mitch texted me, Mitch Miller, NetRep CO, and I were texting last night, and he said Friday, this past Friday, his board passed that MOU. And I told him, well, it's my fault for not getting with you, although your immediate past chairman, and I think your chairman as well, was at our meeting, or were at our meeting. So if they didn't communicate you, but we failed to act on the MOU. There was not a motion put forward to act on it. I agree, Malin. I mean, two years seems like a very long time, and I think I've said from the get-go, I see value in this, but not if it's not done properly. And I don't know if we've just connected in order to do that.
I mean, I think during this time, and my short time of being involved with it and hearing, conversation prior to this, there's no question that it's driven some wedges between some organizations and and some businesses that it's going to take time to heal from that as well. So I'd like for other members of council to jump in, please.
I think it's clear, and I think most of the network board agrees that a centralized point of contact for Nashville makes a lot of sense, representing the entire region here. I think what's unclear is exactly how, I would ask how Johnson City feels about that. How does Washington County, Tennessee feel about that? Elizabethton and others. And the other question is we're talking about what we can do as networks. What does NetRep, and I think it's a good question, what does NetRep do for us? And how does that help Bristol, Kingsport, Sullivan County moving forward?
So, Clay and Bill, Networks had a proposal and it's on the timeline, et cetera. So what in that proposal could still hold as part of this process today? Is there any of it that's irrelevant now, or could it be part of this whole process that we go back to that as a first step and relook at that as a piece and try to move that piece forward?
Yeah, I took it that the MOU the current one was going to be very similar to what we wanted to do about a year ago, which was let's talk about what each organization, how we would represent the region if we were to divide duties rather than territory, and let's just start doing it, telling our partners we're doing this on a trial basis, and then you would get, Chad, I made a note because I wasn't sure if it's a rhetorical question where you were asking what would NetRep benefit. We would see how it was working, and we wouldn't be bound by it, and we could meet regularly and discuss it. I think if we're going to do this, that would probably be the best way. Everybody keep their funding. Everybody keep everything about what we do. But that was what we proposed basically. And NetRep, I don't know if they voted on it, whatever, but Bill Sumner, you may recall that.
I don't think they voted on it.
Just came back and said not interested, but I don't want to mischaracterize it.
But back to Margaret, I mean, just add to what Clay said. I think what Clay was asked to put together by the board, and what he put together was a template for an organization that would do, economic development plus workforce plus other things. And I think it's a good template. There's a lot of good detail in there. And to add to what Clay said as far as this MOU, I was expected more of that sort of detail in there too. And it was kind of a letdown to me, but back to Malin's point, that there was not more there. And again, I would just encourage you guys, if one of the go-tos out of this is that we go add some teeth to it, then we should do that. And I don't care if they passed it or not. We should add more teeth to it to make it more palatable to what we'd be looking for, and that's whatever you guys think, really.
As the MOU that I saw, it left out the crux of, it left out the controversial stuff, which is the process on how we get there. So unless that's in it, all it does is give permission to set that. And if we don't know what that is, and I would challenge that's been the biggest problem that I've seen is in the process. And if trust comes from relationships, and I would challenge from process. And I can say in our city, we expect a high level of professionalism. When we ask for transparency, which has been one of the issues, that means that you get an agenda before a meeting. You know what's going to be discussed. You know who are the leaders, who's participating. You know who's driving the process, both in real person as well as who are some of the people who might not be at the table, but who are part of the process in the background. And then also the planning leadership, and I would challenge, it's an issue for us at Networks. And I think we talked about it at one meeting but didn't vote, was our executive leadership does not include anybody from government, yet we're completely government funded. So I still feel very strongly that our exec committee needs to have one or two government people who have more of the conversations, the pre-planning or whatever, to have that aspect represented. But anyway, so I would challenge, there's huge problem with the process. I don't see unless it's been changed for what NetRep passed, I don't see that there's enough in it to have confidence in approving it at this point.
I completely agree with you, Margaret. And I think I think that the ask would be, and I think we have to decide, you guys have to decide as leaders, do you want to lead or do you want to sit back and wait for them to give you another alternative? I mean, that's one of the reasons this has been slow, because you're right. When the going kind of gets tough, everybody's backed off. And that's just, you look at a few of that timeline, we push details and then it's, others want to be more generic, and going back to that chart that says it's hard. I think you guys just need to decide, do we want to, go forth and put something on the table and be the first proposal, or do we want to just say, guys, you don't offer us anything, which is pretty clear. I mean, I think we've made that clear to them.
Okay, go for it, Lynn.
Few thoughts. I think to recognize the MSA and CSA is important, but I think it's also important to recognize that there have been a lot of projects already done, big projects. The Pinnacle case in point, over $200 million and growing, based on not just the MSA, CSA of those that were mentioned, but it also pulled in Southwest Virginia to an even greater degree, and down around the Greenville area as well. So the MSA, CSA, I get that, but it's already in process. So building an organization does not give it the exclusive rights to exercise the MSA, CSA process. It's been a long 2 years, very arduous, but this is not a surprise. In the first early stages of this, the public sector made it very clear that any action that would be taken would have to be embraced by the equity partners in all of this. And I think that went pretty much ignored by everybody. I know Bill Sora made it very clear on more than one occasion. Margaret, you made it clear. Malin, Chad, Vince, you haven't had the opportunity to do that just yet. But I think Bill Arterbright brought us all into the light of day and said that the MOU as it's written is not something that, there would have to be structural changes to the network's organization. And this is our attorney. He drafted the intergovernmental agreement early on in multiple conversations with representatives of NetRep. We all made it clear that we had a very strong intergovernmental agreement for the purpose that we've invested 20 years in networks, and we've made some things happen. And I've just been, and what's been so great about this is that it's been brought to the point where it is by many people, and not just of the public sector. There have been lots of private sector people involved in this every step of the way. There have been tens of millions of dollars invested. We have, if you want to look, and a very dear friend of mine has said this over and over again, if you want to look at regionalism at its absolute best, look at the airport and look at the aerospace park. And we didn't have to form a new organization to do that. We brought everybody together. Everybody understood that it was a good thing, which brings me back to where we were 2 years ago when we were talking about, what would this look like? Well, if we're going to talk about marketing, the Great Eight of Northeast Tennessee, and we have some challenges about going across the state line, but and those challenges have been different at different times. There's been a point in time when Virginia was absolutely opposed, and there have been times when Tennessee's been absolutely opposed. But if we're talking about the Great Eight of Northeast Tennessee, we already know that Networks has been recognized by the Tennessee Department of Economic Development as a touchstone for Northeast Tennessee. Now, maybe not for all of the counties together, but for the most part, if they've got something coming down the pike, our staff is aware of it, or they are aware of our staff and have worked very well with our staff. Several years ago, we went into an agreement with Hawkins County. Part of Phipps Bend is bonded by the city of Kingsport. And so they asked Networks to reach out from a marketing perspective, and they paid for that. And they have, Clay, correct me if I'm wrong, but they have a point of contact for Hawkins County, correct? And
Yes.
so we have talked about, as far as marketing the region, that, Networks could take the leadership role in that. Each of the surrounding counties and cities would have their economic developer in place, and there would be a full inventory of all possible lands and properties that would include the utilities that currently exist. If there were some spec buildings, if there were uninhabited buildings, we've talked about this. We know what we're doing. Networks knows what it's doing. So as far as working regionally, we already have a vehicle in place to promote economic development in our region, specifically what has been mentioned today, as well as to take in surrounding counties in Tennessee. We could take in Johnson County, Unicoi, Carter. We could take in Greene, Hamlin, Hawkins, along with Washington and Sullivan County. So this is not anything that is beyond the scope of work that Networks is very capable of doing. They're recognized not only in our state, but they're recognized nationally. They have a tremendous marketing plan as it is, very well invested. We've put a lot of money into it. So if we're really talking about regionalism, and if we're really talking about what we're trying to do that would lift the whole region, we've already got a vehicle in place. And as far as a hub organization, it was interesting to me that at our last meeting, the same person had been hired by the Sullivan County mayor to do an MOU or some type of development for First Tennessee Development District. And it already works with the Great Eight of Northeast Tennessee. And a lot of the question in trying to develop a hub organization is where does the private sector, who has money supposedly sitting on the sidelines, where do they put that money as an investment? And so First Tennessee Development District has already worked out for there to be a nonprofit entity, a venture capital fund, if you will, that could be directed by both the public and the private sector. So I think we've already got all of the pieces in place. Do they need refinement? Sure. But I think I agree with Bill Sumner. It's time for us to take the leadership role. We have been in conversation very kindly, calmly, trying to be collaborative, and will continue to be. But to that point, the two men sitting on this call from Networks, Bill Sumner and Clay Walker, they saw the MOU before we saw it as the Networks board, or before we've seen it as a council. And they told them that the word merger was a non-starter. They told them several things that were in that MOU were a non-starter, but yet they insisted on including those words. Our own attorney, Bill Argabright, said that one of the biggest issues at hand was the word merger. We are not interested, in my opinion, in merging, we are interested in continuing to work collaboratively for the good of the region. We know that the Bay lifts all ships. We just don't feel like we've got to hand over our shoreline of the Bay. So for that reason, I would like to ask our staff, once we conclude today, to draft a letter of our thoughts and position and submit it to the network's leadership so that it can then be shared with NetRep so that we can get on with the business of economic development in our region, and to put aside all of this, that we work collaboratively, that we continue this, and that networks could potentially take on the role of the leadership and open an invitation to our surrounding counties and cities so that if they would like to join us in our role of economic development, that they are more than welcome to, that we would work out a vehicle to do that, and to also notify the state that Sullivan Networks Partnership is very active in the role of economic development, and that we welcome any and all of the great 8 of Northeast Tennessee to join us in economic development.
That sounds like some discussion for Networks Board. Also, I would challenge whether going back to that original proposal, if it needs to be tweaked or whatever, or focused in on the traditional development and have that as a MOU or a proposal, or have it a sample proposal that counties could latch onto, or anyway, try to be a little active in actually setting in motion some of the details that Councilwoman Powers talked about that we put out there before, but try to actually put it in writing for folks to be able to consider.
And at our last board meeting, we were encouraged to put into writing those things that we felt. I have it all. I have what I just said completely written down, and am more than happy to share it if anybody would like to have it.
Would you please share that, Lee? Because that was very, very well spoken as usual.
And copy the rest of us too, Lee.
Yes, please. And let me ask a couple clarifying questions. I think I'd like to take that and certainly ask staff to work on that letter. What I heard was, and just correct me where I'm wrong, I'm just trying to clarify for Clay's benefit as much as anything, so we get off, we can get this going in the right direction quickly. Networks would be the lead, keeping our brand, that we would basically offer to cooperate, or Clay will think of a better word, to invite everyone to join. Can you clarify that more, Lee, or is that pretty much?
I can. I think that the first letter that needs to be sent is a letter from our council, if council is in agreement with that, to the network's leadership, and that it would be that that networks, having established their brand and the regional leader in economic development, would offer a plan to join for all of the surrounding counties and cities, so that we are a more unified voice for economic development.
Okay.
And we've done that, and to let the state know that we are taking that we consider ourselves to be the lead organization for economic development in our region. And we don't have to define region just yet, because we don't know who will join us, and that this is a position that we're taking. I agree with you, Bill. It is time that we took the leadership role. We have waited 2 years to see what could be presented to us that would be something that we could all be agreeable to. And along the way, you and Clay and others of our leadership have made it very clear as to what it is that we could or could not agree to. And it has turned into a situation of that, there's just, they keep presenting the same stuff over and over again. And they've been told over and over and over again for 2 years that the word merger could not be used, because that would mean that we would have to completely restructure what we have, and that we don't have appetite to restructure based on the conversation that we've had with our attorney and our intergovernmental agreement. Not to mention the fact, the tens of millions of dollars that we've invested and the product that we now have at hand. And if you want to look at, again, the best example of regionalism, look at the aerospace park. We didn't have to have a big hub organization to make that happen. As a matter of fact, a hub organization probably would have slowed it down. They got the board together, and within, how long was it? 15 months, Mr. Sora, you're at that board.
It was along that timeline from really concept to development of an interlocal agreement to all of the governing bodies approving it.
About 15 months, right?
Or perhaps less. We were within 15 months, we were probably issuing debt.
And so my point is, and I'm repeating myself, but my point is that we've done this. We are doing this. We are recognized by the state as the leader for economic development. And so why would we completely disband something that we know is recognized and respected across the state as well as nationally? Clay mentioned the red carpet tour. We've had site selectors from all over the country come in here and look at what we've got. Now, have we landed? Are all of our properties filled up? Not yet, but we're prime. We're prime. We're ready for it. We know that we need work with our workforce development, but we've gone at this for 2 years. It has been probably one of the most divisive exercises we have experienced in the past 10 to 15 years. And it's time to move on. We have listened, we've been very patient with the situation, and now it's just time for us to step up and to provide the leadership that we have provided for the past 20 years in this region.
Thank you, Lee.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with every word Lee has said. Just think about all the energy that's been spent on this for the last 2 years. I hope we've not missed a beat on some of the other activities that we could have been focusing on. But it's time to go back and like I say, let's go to work. Let's do what we do best.
If I could jump in real quick, Mayor, if you don't mind. You hit a lot of great things, Shirley, and I think because we've been at this and know each other well, that should be no trouble for me to draft what I think you're looking for, and I look forward to getting that letter from the city. You mentioned, Airspace Park was a great point. I think that what we're talking about here is a regular process, though, and we've got the model with what we've done with Hawkins County IDB. In fact, there's going to be, watch our social media, there's going to be an announcement for a company we recruited into Phipps Bend that's going to do a pretty nice expansion that'll be announced by the state today if it hasn't been already. So I can do that. I think one clarifying point, I don't think you meant it when you said that the role of the public sector and the structure that we have being ignored. I don't think you meant that internally.
No.
To the other. And I just want to clarify that. Okay. And then I think everybody's open because we've asked. And I think that anything we put forward as here's our document and our recommendation should include that we want to hear from that rep. What do you want to do on behalf of the region? We'll deal with that because we have asked for it. But say, here's what we can do. What y'all want to do, bring it to us. We're going to be open. But they need to answer a lot of questions that you have and that Kingsport has and the county has. So, but I think if we do those things, it's a great step, and especially in light of net rep wanting to move forward with the current MOU.
Clay and Bill, is that similar to what you're hearing out of Kingsport and in general of Sullivan County?
I think so. I think
Kingsport for sure.
Yeah, I've heard from both that they want to know what specifics on what NetRep will do. How will that relate to CVBs and chambers and NETA? And how will it coordinate with what we do? And I think I know in talking to Mitch, but we're happy to put what we want to do in writing. And I think everybody ought to be happy to do that.
So Clay, you're most familiar with regional models, but I see this as opportunity, and I think I've talked about it at least another time, but that it's to be more of a coalition. And then with a coalition with the different parts, with different roles, but with everybody's shared goals, and perhaps there is need, if not initially at some point, for a backbone or a hub that coordinates that coalition. But then it evolves, and maybe in 10 years, 15 years, we are a hub that is all under one umbrella structurally. But whether more of a coalition model is where we need to be headed at this point. The other thing that I would also say in whatever discussions or as we, or in that MOU or whatever we've talked about in networks, and it sounds like Hawkins County already, so maybe it's in that process, that it's really critical for each of the governmental entities, counties and municipalities, particularly municipalities, that they also have feet on the ground that are there that we tout that that's part of our big success, is that we have an economic development team. Thank you very much, Tom and Matt, and also from BTS April. Anyway, and so that's critical, because if people don't have that, the partnership's not there, or if they don't want it, then they have to pay extra for additional staff to be hired that focus more detail on their area or something to that effect too.
I think it only works that way in the, I've talked to most of you about past experience I've had at working at regional level. You just can't know everything you need to know locally and be in touch. But I would say if a community chooses not to, it wouldn't necessarily, it would just mean they wouldn't get as good results. Right. They wouldn't win as many projects. It's just that simple. So I would say it is about how much work would we then have to do for one community as opposed to another. But more importantly, if I were that community, I'd say, regardless of the money spent, I want to win projects if we're going to compete for projects. So you're not going to, if you don't have somebody on the ground working with us when we're in your community.
Right. But it's also not just, because we know NetRep has done the retail, that kind of development with Johnson City. And that's Tom and our folks have worked on our local retail and some of the other things that tend not to be what Networks works on, and that's a critical piece too. So somehow,
I'm not sure what they've done on retail. We've said that a lot, and this kind of neither here nor there. But I mean, they had somebody working for the city who was in charge of retail when I got here, and so
I can't
I don't
answer.
know.
I didn't think that they currently did. So
yeah, I don't know.
My understanding was they did not have anybody doing economic development for the city at this time. Anyway, but somehow to communicate that success.
Yeah. Well, I think I know what you're looking for, and I'll put it together, and we'll go back and forth with it quickly with partners. And I think we should move quickly. And again, well, everybody knows, call me individually or talk, give me your input, but we need to be very clear of, if you have a deal breaker, let me know now, so it's in there. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's important to reach beyond NetRep. I think it's important to reach out to the region. NetRep is a part of that region, but I think that it's incumbent on networks because it's positioning with the state to reach out to, and you're interconnected and to the region as far as economic development. And that at this point, since we are clustered as the Great Eight of Northeast Tennessee, that we reach out to the Great Eight of Northeast Tennessee and don't limit ourselves to just any one entity. I think this is extremely exciting. This is regionalism. This is collaboration. It's getting out there. You know, you mentioned Nashville, and having grown up in Nashville and still have a lot of family there, you know, when you talk about all of those counties, Davidson, Williamson, and Sumner County, they are all Rutherford County, Wilson County. I mean, we could go on and on with the different counties. They're all experiencing tremendous success, but they are all functioning to do the best for each of their counties. Davidson County and Williamson County are absolute polar opposite counties in their perspectives. Sumner County, Clay, you've worked in Sumner County. You know what goes on in Sumner County. I grew up there. It's different from Williamson and Davidson County, but they're all working collaboratively to the best that they can through the state to bring as much industry there and as much business development as possible. But they haven't lost who they are as entities. They collaborate, but they still stand on their own merit and their own 2 feet. So I think we could look at the Nashville model and be very impressed with that.
That's true.
Bill, I want to go back to Margaret's comment earlier with regards that there's no government representation on the, I guess, committee, board, whatever we're calling this. But I'd like to propose that we add Lee to that as well. I know we just added Miss McCord to it from Eastman.
The problem is,
what is that process?
The problem is, man, we only have 3 jobs, but I don't.
Right. But we can go back. I don't know how our bylaws read, but some bylaws have exec committee includes people represented.
Let me point out something, you guys, and then I don't know. I say it often. I don't know if you hear me or I don't say it enough. I'll get back to why we typically have not. And I thought long and hard this time because we struggled to find somebody to come and be treasurer. First of all, it takes additional time and effort, and it's not. And so it's usually up until all this came about, it was a pretty boring job. It just involved extra work and doing things that you guys probably don't necessarily have time to do because you're already taking on so much. So we've always leaned, at least from what I understand, and I've been doing this now for a few years, we've always leaned toward putting private people in those jobs because we're the volunteers, and you know, I know you guys are volunteers too, practically. But we felt like it was best to do that. Plus the fact that if we wanted to keep the continuity, I don't know if you want to run next time, you know, so we lose that continuity. Or I don't think you guys, but you might get beat and then, you know, Lex or something. So we lose the continuity. I have no problem at all with putting a Lee on the board or anybody else, but I don't think we would want to change bylaws so much as if you guys feel strongly about it, then next time let's just let it be known as you just did.
Could I point out real quick that there's a couple of things, semantics here. The executive committee of networks is the same as the board, which we could, and that's, we could go off on that. This is just a committee we appointed to deal with regionalism, and it's always been open for anybody who wants to be on it. Now, doing it now is fine to add anybody, but Mr. Sumner told the folks at NetRep weeks ago that we're through with the individual meetings. When I have a meeting with you, I'm gonna invite our whole board. And he drew a line in the sand, and I think it was appropriate. So I agree with everything you said, but I think we're kind of closing the door after the horses are out. We're already
yeah, and also Clay's point, I'm through with, and I told him this, I'm through. We're not doing any. We acquiesce to the short group meetings only because that was what was being offered and pushed. And like Clay said, and thank you, Clay, for bringing it up. Told them we're not going to do this anymore. It's got to be open and transparent. The last meeting we did have with that small group, I insisted the mayors, but I told them if the mayors weren't there, I wasn't coming. Because it's time, that time has passed. The whole point was to get some nucleus of an agreement started and then bring it out. And we're at that point now. So we're done with that. Clay's absolutely right.
Let me just say this.
I was referring more to the, sorry, I was referring more to the
officers.
Yeah. Let me just say this. While I appreciate the conversation and all of this, I don't want us to lose sight of what we're doing today. I really want us to get the letter from, I want the letters, would ask that the letter change hands and get to the proper leadership so that we can get on with this. We know that there's onshoring of companies. There are expansions, Clay, as you mentioned. We know that there's a lot of opportunity, and we need to just be ready to hit the ground running and address this once and for all for the time being, and move forward and see if we can't land some great opportunities here for the region.
I think y'all come up with a great path forward that keeps us intact, but we're not gonna burn our boats, as they say. Okay. And it would be kind of silly for us to do that. So thank you.
No, very much. Thank you very much. Outstanding input.
Okay. Any other comments from council?
Not particularly about networks, but something was brought up just a minute ago. I'd like to see, Bill, if we could find out about structure in surrounding areas like Johnson City, Kingsport, Nashville is even mentioned. It kind of led from Margaret's comment that NetRep may have represented like the retail sector in the Johnson City area. We don't know that for sure, but it may be. It'd be interesting to know how that is done in other areas. Retail is one. I was thinking about housing as well. You and I have kind of discussed about how we have, our economic development teams pretty well got their hands full with what they're working on. How are other areas, other cities, other counties, how are they addressing looking for housing partners, developers, builders, and that type of stuff? How are they doing it? They have someone dedicated on staff, and the same thing in the retail area.
I think most cities are allowing that to grow organically, quite frankly. The retail piece doesn't, though. A number of cities will use consulting firms such as Retail Strategies, the Retail Coach, and others that I think Johnson City uses Retail Strategies, and I think Kingsport does also. We've relied, quite frankly, on a very dynamic developer to promote the retail piece in our community, and he's done extremely well at Exit 74 doing that. I don't know that as far as the recruiting for housing, I think, and you and I've had this conversation before, I think the most cities focus on creating jobs, and then the housing follows the job creation, and they use that as a mechanism. But we can talk and see. I know we have pinged a number of communities regarding incentives, as we've talked over the last several months about residential incentives, and we'll be talking later on this in this agenda. Most communities don't do that. Matter of fact, Kingsport and Johnson City are anomalies, along with Bristol, as far as having the utilities incentives. Most communities, at least across the state of Tennessee, rely on job creation to drive that investment toward retail. Toward residential development.
I just think in the housing sector there, we used to have a great story to tell, and sometimes I think it's, that our developers and our builders are going to the easiest place they can to build, where they know what's going on. And I feel like we need to get Bristol's story out to those housing builders and those developers, but maybe something to think about.
We'll be talking more about that on an agenda item later on today.
Okay.
Good.
Well, as always, if you guys need anything from us, we got our go-dos. If you need anything else, call Clay.
And I'll pass it on to Abby.
Yeah, he'll pass it.
Bill, Clay, we certainly appreciate you guys for being on with us today, and very much thank you for all the hard work that you do every day, and look forward to, like you said, going back to work and getting some things done.
Yeah, well, and you brought up, man, I want to assure you, we haven't let anything slide by, Mayor. We've kept our priorities and what we're here to do, but I think this is part of the job, to always explore how to do things better. Is there a better way? And I talk about it with colleagues, but y'all, I think, have opened up the door for a better way that should work. It makes all the sense in the world. And I'll get to work on that. And we've already done it a few times. It just be dusting it off and shaping it up right. So thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, see you guys. Thanks a lot.
Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item. It's a presentation of historic design guidelines.
Yes, Mayor, as you may recall, in 2019, staff was successful in securing a grant from the State Historic Preservation Office to facilitate the development of design standards in the 3 historic districts that we currently have, which is our downtown commercial district, Fairmount, and the Holston Avenue residential areas. The design guidelines are strictly voluntary, so as a result, you won't see a resolution adopting them or anything of that nature. But they are strictly there to provide guidance to individuals that are renovating or constructing property within those historic areas, and to do so with period appropriate construction technique. So with that, I think Sheriff Young will be introducing our speaker today. Thomason and Associates was retained to assist us with the development of these guidelines, and he's here today to speak with City Council. Sheriff?
Thank you, Mr. Sora. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to be here with you all today to present this project that has been going on for just about a year now. So there's been a lot of hard work done to get us to this point. So I'm really pleased to be able to introduce Mr. Thomason. As said, we were successful in obtaining a grant to help produce these design guidelines. So we're very fortunate and grateful to have been able to receive that grant and to have been able to work with Thomason and Associates, who are out of Nashville, Tennessee. They're definitely leaders in the field of historic preservation and have done a great job on this project. So I will happily turn it over to Mr. Thomason now, who will walk you through the project and the historic district design guidelines for the city of Bristol. Bill?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you, and hello, Mr. Mayor and council members, and I appreciate the opportunity to tell you about the project, which we are in the final stages of and wrapping up. I've worked in Bristol for many years on the Virginia side, especially on National Register nominations, and then also worked on the National Register nomination for the downtown commercial district. So I'm very familiar with Bristol and appreciate the opportunity to work on the design guidelines for downtown as well as Fairmount and Holston Avenue. Just a couple of things. One is the purpose of the project was to prepare a user-friendly manual for the property owners, provide information on best practices for appropriate rehabilitation, additions and new construction, and provide information on the available tax credits that are for historic building rehabilitation, and also be a reference guide for assistance where you can go to get more information for rehabilitation projects, that sort of thing. Just to understand that these, the historic buildings that you have in Bristol, they're really in the residential areas. These are some of the best built houses that the city will ever have. And so it's really an economic development kind of approach of how do we preserve and maintain these buildings, many of which are well over 100 years old now and will, certainly last another 100 years if they're maintained and taken care of. So just these are really assets to the city, as well as, of course, the commercial buildings that you have downtown. So that's really our approach of encouraging best practices for their rehabilitation and preservation. And so they can continue to be a real asset to the community. Next. So again, the areas that we looked at, and the project consisted of a lot of walking the streets, a lot of taking photographs, doing analysis of the types of houses, house designs, typical issues with design review that you have in the three historic districts, like Fairmount and next, Holston Avenue, which is a little bit different with somewhat larger houses, and where more, I guess, of the merchants and business folks from the late 19th, early 20th centuries constructed their homes. And we used a wide variety of resources to do our analysis. We've got the old maps, we have Sanborn fire insurance maps. There's any number of resources that we consulted as we put together these design guidelines. So why have design guidelines? Again, they reinforce the historic and architectural character of an area, helps in resale and marketing of your buildings and neighborhoods. It guides appropriate rehabilitation and encourages investment and new development. And again, understand that Bristol's guidelines are voluntary. The guidelines are recommendations for appropriate rehabilitation and new construction. They provide basic sort of design review for areas, but only, again, if you have a majority of property owners and city officials who want to approve that and move forward. And the guidelines can be tailored to that particular neighborhood in terms of any sort of leniency or strictness that the property owners may desire. So the economic benefits of preserving historic downtowns and neighborhoods, historic rehabilitation creates jobs, promotes downtown rehabilitation and revitalization, increases property values, and encourages appropriate development. Excuse me, hold on a second. Sure. Sorry, I seem to have lost the video here. Just a minute. Let's see if I can get that back. I think I'm going to have to exit and then come back in. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's happened to the screen here.
Smith, do you have access to that screen and can share it?
I think, Phil, if you will stop sharing your screen on Zoom, this is Tim Beavers.
Yeah, okay.
Might work.
Okay, I see all y'all again. Okay, and yeah, if you want to just bring up the PowerPoint again. I'm sorry.
Yes, I'll reshare my screen again.
Okay, sorry about that, folks. technology is a wonderful thing most of the time,
While
except when it doesn't work.
while he's bringing that up, I'll say at least one of the things I was going to say, that just to let everybody know that way back when, the Jerry Goodpasture was instrumental when Believe in Bristol, prior to it being named, I think, as our Main Street program, that Phil worked with. Jerry was really instrumental in being sure that our downtown buildings were documented for which we're contributing and non-contributing. So a lot of good work. And now I'll let you go.
Okay, thanks. Back again. So anyway, you know, for Main Street, for downtown, I think we've all seen just all the different rehabilitation projects that you've had in Bristol over the last 20 years. And then across the country, 16.1 billion invested in physical improvements, 56,300 net new businesses, 250,000 new jobs, 88,700 building rehab and construction projects. So anyway, we've just really seen the impact that preserving, maintaining, rehabilitating these buildings downtown, what it means for the tax base for the city, and you know what you do in terms of bringing people into downtown. Okay, next. So you know we've seen some of this here, just some examples here on the lofts here on 6th Street. And that's a great project where you take the upper floor spaces and turn those into apartments or condominiums, depending. Next. The E.W. King building. This is the building before rehabilitation, of course, the 1920s rehab. And then we have here the ribbon cutting here on the left. It came up for this celebration really this year. I was fortunate to be a consultant on this project for its rehabilitation, which provided its property owner with the 20% federal tax credit for this project. And just one thing to keep in mind here, again, we've been working in Tennessee for a number of years and trying to get a state tax credit that would be applied towards real estate taxes and insurance taxes that would be encourage historic rehabilitation projects. All the states around Tennessee have a state historic tax credit in addition to the federal tax credit. But of course, we don't have a state income tax. So we've been looking at other tax methods to defray those kind of credits. So at any rate, we were hoping this year maybe we would get our state tax credit through, but that got, you know, everything sort of ended with the pandemic and the legislature going on home. But next year, we hope we can get a state tax credit in, because it would encourage this kind of rehabilitation like you see here. On the when we look at Bristol on the Tennessee side, there's been maybe $4 million, I think, in rehabilitation in the historic district, and on the Virginia side, it's more like 27 million. So I think you can see just the big differences here that we've got with that tax credit situation. But any support you can provide over the next year or so when the bill gets reintroduced would be great, because it would be just really assist in spurring more rehabilitation on the Tennessee side than just on the Virginia side. Next. So the design guidelines we prepared, again, are these best practices for your downtown commercial buildings on State Street. And we write our design guidelines to be consistent with those that are the federal guidelines as well. There are certain guidelines that you do need to follow when you do a historic rehabilitation, primarily dealing with you know, the storefronts and upper facades and maintaining any kind of real significant interior spaces. But they're all just designed to preserve and protect the architectural character of the building as much as possible. And that's what our design guidelines have been written to do as well. And on Holston Avenue, I mean, we've got any number of historic designs, architectural designs, the Queen Anne style, like you see here, which was very popular in the 1880s, 1890s. This is a really good example of the Dutch colonial style. It wasn't really widely built at the turn of the century, but this is an excellent example of this style. The neoclassical style is another design from the 1890s, early 1900s. And this is a little bit unusual in the use of concrete in the columns. Normally they're wood, but this is different. The whole exterior of this building is of a concrete block construction, including the porch and railing. And anyways, just very interesting design. A little bit more traditional neoclassical style dwelling here on Holston with the full height ionic columns, but a lot of the houses here on Holston have been really well maintained and preserved. And there's also some more modest houses in the historic district, like this bungalow that you have right around the corner from Holston. Fairmount District, you know, again, has really great houses. The zoning there, I think, has not been particularly good for some of these structures. When you have the ability to do a lot of different apartments in these buildings, then they really become more just investment as opposed to owner occupied. And so we see on some blocks some real alterations to these properties, but these kind of alterations, I mean, if anybody ever wanted to take them back to single family again, they can certainly be reversed. And in lots of cases, I think, go back and retain a lot of their original architectural character. And you've got some great streets, you know, Maryland, Kentucky, that, you know, still have a lot of their owner-occupied houses and original designs, original architectural styles, like these great bungalows here on the street. And Pennsylvania, some wonderful houses on Pennsylvania, lots of different architectural styles, from Queen Anne to bungalow to craftsman. Just a really great concentration of historic properties. And of course, the reason why this area was listed in the National Register of Historic Places. Some examples here, Queen Anne style here on Maryland with the projecting gable and one-story wraparound porch, just very well maintained. Colonial Revival style is very popular in this historic district that harkens back to our colonial roots and the designs that we had back in the 1700s. So it was a very popular style that was used widely in the historic district. And bungalows, lots of wonderful bungalows from the 19-teens and 1920s that you have interspersed around the district with the horizontal forms and the high-pitched gable roofs, and a lot of different uses of materials of wood shingles, wood siding, brick, a lot of different variations that you have of these properties in the historic district. So the design guideline fundamentals that we write is preserve original historic fabric, reuse and recycle existing materials as much as possible, repair in kind with like materials or the closest sustainable materials, replace in kind if repair isn't possible with the like materials or closest sustainable materials. And with new construction and additions, have as much of a minimal impact to historic buildings and use sustainable materials as much as possible. So the design guidelines that we create are really intended to be user-friendly, to include a lot of illustrations, a lot of photographs. This is just an example of one that we did before in a community in South Carolina. But the final product that we are giving you resembles this in terms of the layout and narration form of best practices, but again, a lot of photographs and illustrations that are taken directly from the 3 historic districts we worked in. And we also make it clear of what is reviewed in terms of just primarily looking at the primary facade of the building, readily visible side facades, but we always have a lot of variation in terms of the rear elevations that are really private space, and recommend that, you know, those are certainly where you can put additions and decks, and doesn't really come before the purview of any sort of design review. One of the main things is to preserve and maintain the original brick surfaces, masonry surfaces, and stay away from abrasive cleaning. Abrasive cleaning, we have found over the years, when you do abrasive cleaning and then go back in with a hard mortar, it's really detrimental to the building, and you get cracking and spalling like you see here on this building. You also end up with removing the exterior patina of the brick and exposing the soft core, and that sometimes erodes faster than the mortar that you apply, like you see here. Also recommend preserving and maintaining original wood siding, wood shingles, half timbering, stucco, all those kind of features that really provide the character for your historic district. Weatherboard siding, preserve and maintain the weatherboard siding that you have. And these are some illustrations of some of the siding materials that you've got in the historic districts with weatherboard or the wood shingles here on the right. And just really recommend that these be preserved and maintained, and not concealed or not altered. Next. Roof materials. Most of the original roofs have been replaced over time, but you still have some of these great 100-plus-year-old standing seam roofs, like on the left, or the pressed metal shingles here on the right. And you know, these will last another 100 years if they're just maintained and kept in good condition. Certainly encourage the maintenance and preservation of original porches, porch materials. Oftentimes your porches provide the architectural style. They demonstrate the design that the house represents. So you've got these kind of milled posts and milled railing on this house on Pennsylvania. It's just a really lovely design, and really reflects the character of the property. Some other examples of porch columns, and just again, the guidelines are written to preserve and maintain these as long as possible. Or if you've lost the original porch columns, there are certainly places that you can get replacement columns that are in keeping with the original design. You have these milled columns on the left, concrete column there on the right. Enclosing porches on primary elevations and side facades like you see here, certainly fine and appropriate, as long as you have the screen panels just kind of minimal, and the structural framework minimal. But these are the sort of things to stay away from, that we would recommend against: the use of aluminum porch columns on primary facades. Fiberglass, you can use those in some instances. As long as you've got the right kind of design of a Tuscan column or a classical design. Some examples here that would be fine and appropriate in the historic districts. Vinyl, not quite as much. They still kind of look like plastic. These could be used on rear elevations, but we would discourage these from being on the fronts of houses. And we look at appropriate alternative materials, like the composite porch floors, like you see here, the Trex material. This is one of the widely known brands. Certainly something like this as a porch floor replacement, fine and appropriate. Preserve and maintain architectural features like your original doors. These are examples of some doors in the historic districts. And windows, preserve and maintain original windows as much as possible. We certainly are finding now with all the research that we've been doing on windows that preserving and maintaining the original old growth wood window makes a lot more economic sense than their replacement and then with vinyl windows or vinyl clad kind of windows. But there's certainly a variation of available windows out there. There are wood windows that you could add back if your original windows are gone. There's aluminum clad designs that are sometimes appropriate. But what you look for is a way for energy savings is to preserve and maintain original 1/1 wood sash, like you see here, and just add storm windows. My windows are all original in my house. They're about 94 years old. They're in great shape, and I've just applied storm windows. And that's the approach that we certainly recommend for property owners. Or if you have to replace your windows, just do a replacement window with the true divided lights. And there's certainly, Pella, Anderson, Marvin, all these window companies out there that have these kind of windows available for property owners. Encourage the preservation of the original outbuildings, like the old garage there on the left, the frame construction, and the brick two-bay garage there on the lower right. These are all just assets to the properties and should be preserved and maintained as long as possible. Other site features that we address are cast iron fences. You've got a number of notable fence designs like you see here, and certainly just preserve and maintain these as long as possible. The addition of wood picket fences in front yards, certainly appropriate, and encourage that if that's what the property owner chooses to do. Privacy fences, there's any number of appropriate designs for privacy fences, primarily just pulling them back from the main facade of the house and enclosing, this is a way to enclose side and rear yards. Handicapped access ramps can certainly be designed to blend in with historic properties. This is an example of just adding a ramp on the side and access to the porch. And you can see where landscaping is being used for screening. So there's certainly some guidelines that are appropriate for adding these kind of features when needed. And this is an example of a successful use of one of these chair lifts, and we're finding that that's used every once in a while. This is another way of accessing properties, especially those that might be converted to offices, where it's again originally a dwelling, but there may be some conversion for office use or doctor's offices, that sort of thing. And this is an appropriate sort of approach to how you handle those sorts of situations. New construction. This is an example of a new garage, and basically it's just maintaining the same kind of character as the original house, a gable roof with shingles, appropriate kind of doors. Same thing here. Two-bay garage that we've got here, but there's a lot of variations that you can do in terms of appropriate outbuildings when you are designing, doing new construction. Another example here of an appropriate single-bay garage. Again, a new building. Then we look at the size and scale of additions, and there's certainly a lot of appropriate ways that you can add on to your house. That's very common. And again, you're just looking to do the size and scale. Yes, next, where the property is on the rear elevation and is just in the right kind of size and scale to the main property. This is an example here. You can see the addition kind of on the right side of your screen there, but you know, it's a 1.5 story addition to the back of this house. Another example here of, and a lot of this gets into your side yard setbacks and what you can really see from the street. So next slide, you can see the size and scale of this addition. It's very large, but again, because it's not readily visible from the street, you can have an addition that's of this square footage. And we also provide guidelines for appropriate new construction in the historic district. So you can move forward with what we can call compatible infill. And these are some designs that we've had in Nashville and some of our historic districts. But it's really where you have a porch on the primary elevation, you've got right-sized windows, gable roofs, hipped roofs, just making them as compatible as possible with the historic buildings that you've got up and down the street. And I think architects are getting certainly a lot more adept at these kinds of designs. And we've got a lot of infill that's been constructed in Nashville and a lot of other cities that I've worked in, Knoxville, all across the state. And these are, for example, Habitat for Humanity houses. So we find that these can also blend in when you work with the Habitat people to really complement the historic district they may be designing and building in. So we look at what level of review that's out there as possibilities. In Tennessee, we have historic district zoning, and that really regulates exterior alterations visible from the street, streetscape elements, new construction and additions, and demolition. Then we also have available in Tennessee, and this is widely used in Nashville, and I live in a conservation zone in my historic district. And that only controls, regulates demolition, new construction, and addition, so that you preserve and maintain your houses as long as possible. Any new construction is compatible with what you have up and down the street, and additions are correctly sited at rear elevations and are of the right size and scale. So there's different approaches that we have in our historic districts across Tennessee, and it just depends really, again, on what property owners in a given area, given boundary may choose or desire. So to summarize, again, design guidelines reinforce historic and architectural character. They stabilize and increase property and resale values. We find that all around the country, that historic districts designation always increases your property and resale values. We haven't found any studies that are to the contrary. And again, our final product, we're in the last stages of completing this under this grant. And what we've provided to you is a user-friendly and illustrated manual that property owners can use. And again, not only take advantage of the tax credits in the commercial district, but developers can buy houses in the residential districts and do a substantial rehabilitation of them, rent them out, and also get the 20% tax credit. So there are ways that you can utilize the existing credits in the residential areas as well as just downtown. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions y'all might have.
I was just going to point out, I think almost all the examples were ones from Bristol, correct? There were a few that you couldn't find in our community, but most of them were our examples.
Yes, and both the PowerPoint and, of course, almost everything I think we've got, except for the negative examples. Any sort of bad examples are not from Bristol. They're from other communities.
Good.
Again, this does not require any official action by council, but it is in the way of information. These are guidelines only. The Planning Commission has already received this presentation, and I think it received it favorably.
So
the only thing I was going to add is that I guess if anyone is watching, I guess we can't reiterate enough that these are just guidelines. This is not to where we start getting calls of saying my next door neighbor is doing whatever to their home. They're putting in certain windows that are not to the historic nature of the house, and start getting those calls, because that's not what this is about. It just is a guide. If someone chooses to use it, then they have it.
I'm just going to add to that also too, that if someone owns property in one of these areas, you know, the guidelines are a great resource if someone wants to ask our planning department what are their thoughts about doing certain things to a certain property. You know, our planning department can refer to these guidelines. So I think it was very well done.
And, you know, to that point, we had an older home on Holston Avenue many years ago that we completely refurbished, and we just kind of did a wing, you know, we rubber banded out there to do it. And, you know, based on things we had seen and this, that, and the other, I think it's great to have a document like this, to have the expertise within our planning department to help guide people as they come in. And, you know, I think to Vince's point, I think you're exactly right. It's just a guide. It's just to give people some direction if that's what they're looking for. And it really makes for a better aesthetic community, which makes it more attractive to more people. So, and I just can't get over the breadth of work that's been done. Thank you, Phil, and thank you to our planning department, and thank you to the National Park Service for providing us with the grant to underwrite this. Awesome.
It is a beautiful study, put together really thoroughly, et cetera. And I'll reiterate what Lee said too. We live in a 100-year-old house that we've lived in for close to 40 years. And if we'd had some guidelines like this to help guide, there might be a few decisions that we might have done differently. So to have these, I think, will be very helpful. Also, I think you're noting at the beginning that it's economic development to maintain our old neighborhoods and the quality houses, et cetera. So, and certainly to our community's advantage, as well as to our to individuals. It keeps the value of their home or increases it by maintaining the historic quality. So thank you so much. Thanks for liking our community, and that comes through with the work that you do, that you appreciate what we have. That helps us to appreciate it as well. Thanks.
Well, and I'm hoping this project and, you know, some future projects really will heighten awareness of what I think is very underappreciated architecture in Bristol, Johnson City, and Kingsport. I mean, I love Jonesboro, you know, but Jonesboro gets all the press all the time. And, you know, the quality and extensiveness of the historic districts that you've got in the Tri-Cities, I just think is just wonderful. And again, does not get nearly the appreciation they deserve.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of great opportunities here in Bristol. So hopefully we'll get some folks that's interested in going down this path. Again, we appreciate your time you spent on this, and great presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to present to you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item.
Yes, Mayor. The next item is a discussion of the residential development incentives, and we've had this on our agenda for work session for the last few months. And quite frankly, I want to continue to keep it on there until we get what City Council desires in terms of the proper menu of incentives that are available to motivate residential development in our community. We've covered a lot of ground. I think and there's a memo in your packet for today that's prepared by Tim Beavers that runs through where we are on Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 of the housing study that Sheriff delivered to you all during our last work session, and also some recommendations. And I guess we'd like to take your temperature on certain initiatives. Do you want to move forward with modifications to our codes, or do you want to wait for the state? And I think we're really at a point from a staff standpoint where we're uncertain as to when the state is going to do the things that they may do. So if it's a desire of council to do, if it is the desire of council to do certain things with energy codes, let's go ahead and get on with that. There are other things here that Tim's going to talk about that gives you, as Chad mentioned earlier, where are we on certain things? Tim's going to give you an update on all of those initiatives that were brought forth in Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. So, Tim?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Torre. I really do appreciate the opportunity to share exciting information with council and everybody that is watching on residential development in the city. And I know there's a lot of hard work put in the project with the home study, the housing study, and these initiatives that are in the memo, you know, from various departments. Development services, obviously a big part, economic development, legal department, community relations, parks and rec. I mean, we really touched a lot of departments, and as a team came together and are working on these incentives and the actionable items in Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 of that housing study. I just wanted to briefly, you have the memo, y'all have read it. I just want to briefly touch to it and really focus in on a couple of some of the actionable items that we are working on, the bigger items in all the incentives here. There's several. When we start out, we talk about affordable housing, housing discrimination, homebuyer education classes, homeowner financing assistance, and most of those are already being done through our CDBG home programs, as well as our CHODOs, which are community housing development organizations. So there are a lot of training and education and information that are put out through the CDBG home program and home programs and the CHODOs for people that are looking to get into affordable housing, and to help educate them about what it means to have a home and to own a home, and how to get into home and how to get financing. And they are required with the home and CHODO for the buyer assistance program to take a program on education classes on home ownership. So those are 4 items that were in Chapter 4 that are being done and will continue to be done by those programs and expanded on by those programs. Some other things, you know, in Chapter 4 were website information, and we're working with John Luttrell and community relations on updating our website, community development website, to make it more user-friendly. We have a great website, bristolpn.org, to go to for people to get all kinds of information about the city and the region. But we want to try to make our website for people looking for residential development and other things as user-friendly as possible. So it's an ongoing thing. We're working with, like I said, community relations to update that website to make it more user-friendly and provide information quicker to people. And hopefully that will encourage them to look at home ownership and development in the city. Also, on the senior population, we are continuing to educate developers about the need for single level family and desire and the want of single level homes in the city. And those, and even existing homes or building new homes, if they're not single family, do universal design features such as step-free entries, curb ramps, door levers, things that make it more accessible to our senior population and our special needs population. But there is a huge desire with our area, and you look at our average age for Bristol, that we see more and more people wanting these single level homes as we age in the area. So we're still continuing, when we see developers, encouraging them to look at the single level lifestyle. Also, quality of life staff, we're looking at and getting names and people and organizations to include on a quality of life roundtable that will look at the quality of life in Bristol. And we're trying to put that together and identify those key individuals and groups. And what we want to do is to say, hey, you know, we have a lot of great features in Bristol and quality of life amenities already, but how do we improve on those, expand into new opportunities? What is the community seeing as quality of life needs and issues in our community, and the exciting things that we're currently doing there? So we're looking to put that round table together. And also when we meet with developers that are doing residential development or any development, we look at encouraging them to add quality of life amenities. We do require sidewalks and subdivisions where you have new street extensions, but are there other opportunities there, such as open spaces, activity centers, swimming pools, that they can incorporate into those developments to add some quality of life amenities for that residential areas? We've talked a lot in the past and still on the utility incentive program. We're working with the community relations once again to market that program, change our brochures up to try to get that utility incentive program out there for water and sewer, where the developers for new subdivisions can get reimbursed for those water and sewer materials. Also, we are looking at how we could tweak the program to incorporate multifamily developments where the units are sold, such as a townhome development, where they're not rental units, but they are individually owned units, and to make changes in that program to allow that, to bring that to council to see if that's the desire, to change that, to allow those multifamily developments to tap into that resource. Staff's also working with the Bristol Housing on looking at, you know, we had the redevelopment district study back in 2005, and looking at the residential components, like you have the Weed and Seed area or the Boer Road area, and they're also looking at an area down that's South Bristol, down toward Exide Drive and Volunteer Parkway 11W, down in that area, working on gathering data and determining if these districts would still qualify to be proposed for a redevelopment district. And that redevelopment district certainly could take advantage, if approved, of tax increment financing. But just looking, do they still qualify? And then if they do, is that something council wants to bring forward to make them redevelopment districts, take advantage of those programs for, you know, Weed and Seed, and the Boer Road would certainly would be residential in nature of development there, but the South Bristol could be a mix of residential and commercial or offices. So there's an opportunity down there for a mixed use development. Staff has also been investigating on our tap fees. We do have currently incentives on our tap fees if developers install the infrastructure. But we're looking at investigating the tap fee holiday and the mechanics of that. Kingsport has utilized something similar in the past. There's some bullet points in your memo about how that was accomplished in Kingsport. They had some participation in it, but we're trying to develop some bullet points for Bristol that we can put forth to council to see if you all would be interested in tap fee holidays for residential developments. Basically, that would mean the possibility of getting reduced or free sewer water taps to encourage developers to take advantage of building inside the city. The biggest thing, one of the bigger things I'll talk about now is residential building codes. I know that's been a topic of conversation. The state did adopt the 2018 residential building codes in the past couple of months. The state still has not adopted, and we don't have a good time frame for the 2018 commercial and other codes, building codes. So if it's council's desire, as Mr. Soar said, we would propose to go ahead and move forward with the city's adoption of the 2018 residential building codes, the same as the state did, with the same exceptions. And those exceptions would be fire sprinklers are not mandatory. Building envelope air tightness testing, basically the blower door test is more commonly called, would be a visual test and not mandatory. The duct blast test, which test your HVAC duct leakage would be optional. And then use of the 2009 fenestration and insulation tables, which basically we're on the 2012 version right now, would roll back some of those increased insulation values that we currently require. And similarly, the state has adopted for the residential building codes, which would be 1-story, 2-story, and multifamily dwellings, the 2018 International Energy Code. And they did choose those same bullet points up above are in the energy code, but it would basically roll back, like I said, from 2012. 2012 version of the codes do require increased insulation values. And by adopting what the state currently is on, the 2018 with those exceptions, it would roll back to the 2009 insulation tables, which would be less of an expense in building homes in Bristol. It would make the homes less energy efficient, but once again, the cost of building them would be a little less. That is something, like Mr. Soar said, y'all can discuss if you want to move forward with that. I know I've been working with Matt Bailey in codes and Danielle Smith on drafting those resolution or ordinances to adopt those codes if y'all so choose. Also, zoning ordinance last night, Planning Commission met and we did talk through the bullet points briefly about changes in the zoning ordinance, which could help residential development. You have those bullets such as allow for rental of accessory dwelling units. That would be, and it doesn't have to be in all the zones, but it could be in some zones that may open up opportunity for people to rent those and have some income from those. Currently, you can have the accessory dwelling units. Mother-in-law suites is typically what they're called. I don't know why they never called them father-in-law suites or something, but they're mother-in-law suites. But that would allow the opportunity right now. You can have those, but you cannot charge rent for those, even to your family members, one way or the other, or strangers. So that might be an opportunity. Also to amend the definition of a multifamily unit. Currently, our multifamily unit definition is 3 attached units is a multifamily unit. And we would like to propose to Planning Commission to look at amending that to allow detached units, so they don't have to be attached. And that would allow for maybe some patio homes development in the multifamily areas we have in the city. And then we also talked briefly about the reuse of vacant institutional and churches, institutional properties and churches, Rosemont being one of the biggest ones that we've all talked about before. And it's in a zone that doesn't allow for multifamily use of that facility currently. So how do we put regulations in place that would allow for some adaptive reuse of those buildings instead of letting them just sit there because they're in the wrong zone currently to do much with them. So we did start talking about that. Also looked at planned residential developments and updating those design or those regulations on the planned residential developments to allow more flexibility. We currently just have a couple of property zone PRD, but the reason that district was put in the zoning ordinance to begin with was to, maximize the use of vacant lands for developers. And we just feel like it's been underutilized because it just needs updating. So looking at updates to that, and then look at rezoning some areas. We have the R4 and R5 multifamily zones, but to look and see if there are areas that it would make sense to go ahead and rezone to R4 and R5 to encourage development there of denser multifamily units. Other things currently staff are working on are the residential home construction plans. I know Sheriff has been talking and Matt with the Roanoke, Virginia and Chattanooga, Tennessee programs, the actual architects that drew the plans for those programs, about them drawing us or using those plans for Bristol for infill development. That would give, as Mr. Thomason talked about, gives some opportunities to have plans that are pre-approved that would match the characteristics of certain areas that people could use in the city. Those plans, like I said, we're working with those two, Chattanooga and Roanoke, the architects involved in that, to see if we can work out a similar program as those two communities have. And then I know our legal and staff have been working on the legislative opportunities. We still haven't heard anything back from the comptroller regarding those questions that were posed to them previously. And then we are starting working through the grant opportunity program, that TCA, that would allow grants for blighted areas to utilize some grant funding, and putting that mechanism in place that we'd have to work through with the Attorney General to establish that program. I know Danielle and Sheriff have been looking for other communities. The closest we've found, and I can't remember the city now, if it's Nashville or Chattanooga or Memphis, was a facade grant program that Danielle had found that was along that lines. But it's just another opportunity we're working on. I mean, that memo, it's just trying to give you an update on where we are, and staff's working hard, all the departments. I mean, there's, like I said, multiple departments very excited about doing that, and just trying to move the ball down the field for residential development in the city, and just really proud of all the departments and staff that have worked on this. And with that, I'll, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
And when would we, I think it all sounds great, do we have a time frame of having all this back from planning? I know it was talked about last night, but some of the stuff that from the planning commission, I mean, could we like put in there like to have it back by, say, December?
Well, I think with planning commission, we'll have to talk to them at the next meeting, because there are a lot of things they are currently looking at. If you watch planning commission last night, you know, they did move forward with the RE zone changes that we'll be getting into adopting. So there's several. I don't think if we put them all on them at once, then they're going to get bogged down with all of them. So we are going to start, as we discussed last night with them, trying to pick the low-hanging fruit on some of those regs with them to get those done quickly. Some of the bigger things, we will we'll have to space it out a little bit. I mean, it just won't all be bingo bango. They're ready in December to put forward all those regs on those bullet points to planning commission, but we're going to keep discussing them. It's 3.5-hour meeting last night, so they may get really tired of us. I don't know if they're up for multiple 3.5-hour meetings a month, but we're going to try to push them forward. You know, like I said, get the low hanging fruit the quickest that we can, and then work on the longer range, bigger picture on some of those revamps to the regulations. So in general, we're going to try to move as expeditiously as possible, along with the other actionable items that they're working on outside of residential incentives that they have been working on.
I think there are things that city council can control the timeline on, and some of those would be like expanding the utility incentive package to multifamily housing, and we will bring you a proposal back next month to do that. The TAP fee holiday will also discuss how that model might work. And if both of those, and we'll put those on a work session for October, and if those are favorable, then those are things that can be on the November agenda for City Council to formally consider. The building codes, I said, we're working toward that. If that's something that you all want to do now, that is a change to the ordinance, so that would require 2 readings, we could have that for consideration on first reading in October. But those are the pieces that you can do pretty quickly. Also, the Housing Authority is working toward those 3 redevelopment districts that Tim mentioned earlier in his presentation. Once they get beyond their plan of work, and I think that will be done more expeditiously than probably the Planning Commission will, and that there's more moving parts in what the Planning Commission is dealing with. I think the redevelopment districts are a little more straightforward. I would hope that they have that before them at their October meeting, and then that would come back to City Council for designation then in November if it matches up with that timeline from the Housing Authority.
Yeah, I mean, I'm prepared. I don't know about everyone else, but to move forward with on the regulations, get that done.
Talking about the energy codes and building codes revisions.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great first step as well in trying to move this forward.
And I mean, everyone has, like, I think we discussed it before, they have a choice. If they want to make it more energy efficient, then the builder has the opportunity to do that. And it depends. I mean, and it's also the buyer, if that's what they choose to purchase or not, but it's a choice. So I think it'd be great, and whatever we need to do to get this started, and let's move forward.
Tim, as far as the what you mentioned on the energy codes and adopting 2009 standards along with everything else at the 2018 standards, and I know you said that mirrors what the state is doing, or the state has done. Let me say that. Is that where Kingsport and Johnson City are as well?
Well, Kingsport has already adopted all of the 2018 codes. They adopted it before the state did. Theirs does not match the state code. They may be a little more strict in certain areas. I don't know if they'll go back and amend their codes now that they've seen what the state's adopted for residential. And likewise, when the state adopts the rest of the 2018 codes. Johnson City's on 2012, and I know that Matt Bailey, our codes administrator, and those two counterparts in Kingsport and Johnson City have been talking, and Johnson City and us really more than Kingsport at the moment, because since they've already adopted them, but looking at adopting similar codes. And basically what we're proposing is adopt the state, what they've adopted. I mean, we have to do that as a minimum and not do anything above that. That's our proposal. And I don't, like I said, Johnson City's been talking with Matt more frequently, since they're going to have to make a move on codes at some point also.
I just think on the codes, I definitely think we should move forward with the codes as well as everything else as soon as we can. But I think one of the key things is to make sure, if we can, that Johnson City and Kingsport are matching what we're doing, so that we don't have the back and forth type action. We can actually say to developers and builders, we have exactly the same codes as Johnson City and Kingsport. We're on the same page. Everybody's doing the same thing. It just eliminates that aspect of it.
Yes, I think just by adopting what the state has adopted, that is very helpful, unless we see something, and certainly we'll talk about it in work session as we, if we see something on the other codes as they come out different than the state, that they're strongly feel needs to be adopted for the region. But looking at the residential code and the residential energy piece, we do not feel there's anything there above the state minimums that need to be put forth for adoption at this time.
And I think as this whole process has taught us, is that this is a constantly evolving process. It's not a one and done. It's a constant looking, researching, being educated as to what all of these various levels of codes mean, and can enhance what it is that we're trying to do. So, I'm excited that we are moving forward. I think if we can afford the tap fee holiday, I think that's a great thing to do. Anything that we can do, because I believe that, of course, this is economic development as well, but we've just got to get that ball rolling. I believe that once we have a developer in here that has a really good experience, and we've had developers that have had good experiences, but as demand in the market increases for housing, which we know it already is right now, housing is just At a minimal, home prices are going up significantly because there is so little inventory. Anything that we can do to really get developers on board right now within reason to make it as builder friendly as possible, I think we'll see others follow. It's all dependent on what we've put into place as a council and how that's executed as a staff. And I think that we've got both council and staff are working hand in glove on this. And I really do appreciate everybody's efforts to move this along.
Yeah, week before last, I drove around Bristol quite extensively, and there's a lot of land, vacant land, that is available to these developers. So, you know, if you have that resource, we can present this, and then with the demand that's there, I think we've got a great formula.
Well, and even the fact, if you know, I know we've all read what was in our agenda, but even the fact that we are working with the state to get their take on what we can and can't do as far as incentives, I think we're being very progressive in this and very forward thinking and trying to make these things happen. So,
yeah,
good stuff.
I wanted to clarify one thing, Danielle. If I'm not mistaken, Tim mentioned the Attorney General as well as the Comptroller's Office. We have already received a response from the Comptroller's Office.
We're awaiting a response from the AG. You're right. The Comptroller's Office, they've already responded. We aren't awaiting anything from the Comptroller's Office.
I didn't know. Okay, I just didn't know if there was any further discussion about another another direction or something like that. So it's really the Attorney General's Office that we're waiting on right now. Yeah. Okay. I agree with everybody. I think we should move forward on all aspects, you know, as time will allow, as soon as we possibly can.
If that's the consensus of council, we'll move forward then with first reading on the energy code revisions then at our October meeting. And we'll plan on having a couple other items then once we flesh those out for the October work session, and then formal consideration in November, if that's what you feel appropriate. Hopefully we'll have also the redevelopment districts that have been addressed by the Housing Authority for consideration then by City Council in November.
One other thing I wanted to mention real quick for us just to think about and give consideration to is I know we're going to be doing a lot of marketing, promoting, you know, through our direct mailings, brochures, updates to the city's webpage, and other electronic media as it's termed in here. And I'm going to equate this to someone donating to a charity. And I can get multiple correspondence by mail for a charity, a very worthy charity, but a telephone call from a person makes all the difference in the world, or a meeting in person with someone, eyeball to eyeball, that's what I say to a lot of our sales reps here, means a lot. And I feel that, you know, our staff members, that they're pretty well, they're fully loaded with the things that they're working on right now. Our planning department, I feel, is fully loaded. It's difficult for them to get out and meet, you know, to make a telephone call and go out and meet someone. And the same thing with, you know, our economic development team. They've got their hands full in other areas, traditional type of economic development. You know, something that I think that we could consider is just, is there something we should be doing to reach out on a personal level and let folks know what we're doing, what we're headed towards, and that type of thing. And again, I related to someone actually talking to me directly about a charity that they have. It means a lot, but I can get all the correspondence I want in the mail and other direct types of media, and I won't respond to it until someone calls me.
I think it's a good point. You know, we, and I guess it was late June, we invited all of the developers, the residential developers in the Tri-Cities area to a meeting. Not all of them came, certainly, but I think to your point, maybe now the next step is to contact them individually and invite them in and have that one-on-one conversation with them, and to share with them some of the properties that are open or that are vacant, as Mayor Luttrell mentioned earlier, in our community. And then also those properties that staff has identified that's outside of our corporate limits, but near trunk lines that could be easily developed, or we could easily extend trunk sewer to and make them developable. So I think your point's well taken.
Well, and even if until we get lift to all of this, if we invited everyone back in once we have all of the brochures and information together, to say, you know, under advisement, this is what we've come up with and this is what we're encouraging. And then that would just give everyone an opportunity to hear the same thing one more time. And then beyond that, to reach out on an individual basis. I think there's power in bringing people together for information sharing, and then to follow up one more time. I just think until we get the lift that we need, the more contact, the more touches we have, the better.
I think as we finalize some of these initiatives, we're going to be the end of the year, end of the calendar year, finalizing these. We had a meeting in June, perhaps a January meeting of a similar nature to indicate how the game has changed in terms of incentives here would be very much appropriate.
One quick question that I was just going to ask about. I was kind of looking over our planning commission minutes and things of that nature. And I know you guys met last night, Margaret and Malin and Tim. And what was the general thought about the food trucks in residential areas? And I know, what was the thought on that?
Tim?
Well, I think the conclusion from Planning Commission was for staff to look at crafting some sort of bullet point right now to put into regulations for their discussion. We realize that is a growing segment of food trucks, especially during the current health crisis, and that there has been residential use of food trucks. So it was a positive reception, I think, Margaret and Malin, to looking at our food truck regulations in general and tweaking them to meet the times as they were adopted. I can't remember when they were adopted originally, but certainly the use of food trucks has proliferated in the past years, and especially this, it seems like in the past, 8 to 12 months. So that was positive. So staff will be working on those regulations, and that's what I was talking about with Vince, that they are working on a lot of different regulations other than residential that we're trying to get through. We still have some sign regulations that need to get finalized and other things. So they've got a full plate. Like I said, 3.5 hours last night. They stayed with us, and very proud of that. And typically their meetings have been going 3 hours, but we started at 5 o'clock last night instead of 6, and went to about 8:30. So great session. Things were accomplished and great discussion. And Malin and Margaret can expand on
that. Chad, I did make one comment last night regards to that, is that, we have to be cautious that we don't open up Pandora's box for potentially a lot of other things. But that's what we do.
The residents in my area that have kind of, they have asked food trucks to come into their neighborhood, and this is, not very much traffic in these areas, but it's been a very positive response for the neighbors, and it's been really a cool thing for the neighborhood kids and the neighborhoods, the residents in the neighborhood, correspond with each other. It's been really a great thing to get communication going within a neighborhood. So so far, the things that I've heard have been very positive.
Yeah.
I think that as we come on through COVID and all this, we're going to have some really great positives that come out of it. And just because we're in residential areas doesn't necessarily mean that, we couldn't figure out how to do this. I know planning is working on that, but what a great way to build community. I mean, everybody, the food truck is there. Everybody comes, everybody pays. It's like having a wonderful date and going Dutch all at the same time, and while social distancing and enjoying being together. So I think there's some great things that are going to come out of this, and this very well could be one of them. I'm excited about it.
What is right now? Because I watched most of the meeting last night, but of the current, well, I mean, we've had them here at my house, parked in my front yard a couple of times. And what is the current regulation now of that? If it's on my property, if it's sitting on my property, is that allowed, not allowed, or
There's no
what?
regulation.
What's that?
There is a regulation regarding in commercial districts, but there's no regulation at all regarding residential districts.
No, okay.
Yeah, so I think that we also talk this as a way of being proactive so that you don't end up in a situation like Sullivan County, and we were sure to point out that was actually a zoning change, not regulations for how things are going to be allowed. So that was different issue, but it brought to light the opportunity. So.
Anything else on that? Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda.
Okay, Mayor, the next item deals with Resolution 2028, which was adopted on April 3rd, 2020, which provided temporary regulations for the sale of beer by delivery. As council may recall, Governor Lee issued Executive Order number 17 early in the COVID period that we're in now, which allowed restaurants to deliver, home deliver, or prepare for carry out alcoholic beverages along with the food element. We've got a couple of businesses in town though that are microbreweries or craft breweries that just serve the craft beer and don't have a food element. So Resolution 2028 provided privilege to those holders of beer permits for on-premises consumption or manufacturing, or dual permit holders to provide delivery or carry out without the prepared food element being required. Well, that resolution expired on May 30th, 2020, May 31st, 2020. So those permit holders, such as Cascade and others, would not have the same ability that other providers that have a food element with their craft brewery or their beer sales to provide a carry-out service of alcoholic beverages or a delivery service. So we've had a request to once again look at that issue. This was briefly discussed with our beer board in August. I don't think there was any pushback with that. So we bring it now to council, and Danielle has provided a memorandum included in your material that discusses the statutory ability to do this, and to essentially determine whether City Council has an interest in extending this provision to those types of craft beer distributors that do not have a food element as part of their business model. Danielle, would you like to speak to this issue?
Sure. And can everybody hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. As Bill introduced it, what we're being asked to do is really take more of a permanent step with regards to beer delivery, similar to what Johnson City has done. The regulations that we adopted in the spring were temporary. They were in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. They have expired, but even without that expiration, the business that we've talked to would really like to see this become something that they can rely on and that's a permanent fixture of our beer ordinance. So I think you've got a couple of options if you want to go forward with this. You could adopt an ordinance that basically puts in something similar to the regulations that we adopted in the spring, where any existing permit holder or classes of permit holders would have the option to deliver beer, or you could ask somebody to get an additional license to have a beer delivery service, which is what Johnson City did. Now I would qualify that TABC really regards the delivery of alcohol by restaurants that have TABC permits as being their purview. And so if we wanted to do this, we really need to limit it to restaurants that have a beer permit only, that are only serving beer, that aren't serving any other kind of wine or liquor. And beer, in this context, beer means something that's under 8% alcohol by volume. So it includes things like seltzers and ciders and those sorts of things. So with that, if there's any questions or any kind of discussion that we want to have, that would be.
So are you saying the ones with the ABC permit, they can deliver anyway?
Right now they can, because the governor has acted by executive order to allow them to deliver, and that will go through September 30th.
Okay.
Now, if that governor's order expires, I don't think TABC really regards us as having the ability to let those people deliver beer, because they look on them as their permit holders almost,
Right.
even though they do have a beer permit as well. So I think to avoid stepping on toes, you'd probably want to, I would respect that distinction that TABC is drawing and try to craft something that is only addressing the people who have beer permits. I suspect that the delivery power is probably going to be extended with the rest of the governor's executive orders, just because I think it's probably helping in a lot of cities, and it's probably something that nobody is ready to let go of yet.
Right. So I guess it's just a whole different. I know there's separate permits for like their liquor permit.
Mm-hmm.
So if they have dual permit,
yeah,
they would still be able to do this if even if they had food and they had dual permits. Are we saying that we're only going to allow it for the ones that do not have an ABC permit?
Our dual permit is not a TABC license and a beer permit. That's a kind of beer permit that we issue that allows for on-premises and off-premises service. And so I think if they just had a dual beer permit, we'd be fine saying they can deliver. I guess what I would be talking about is a restaurant that has that limited service permit from TABC, or that it's got the liquor license from TABC. TABC is really taking the position that those are their restaurants, if you want to put it that way. It would be up to them or the state to say whether those people could deliver.
Right, could deliver the liquor portion, but we're saying that they can deliver the beer portion if they chose with a dinner.
No, that's I guess what I'm saying is that the way that TABC looks at this, delivery could only be made available to someone who just has a beer permit from the city of Bristol, who doesn't have any kind of TABC license.
Okay.
Because they're looking at that as their license holder versus our permit holder.
Okay. So we don't have, I mean, they can do that. So you're saying as far as their delivery, they can do that whether we say yes or no.
Yes, they
can deliver based on the state. So it doesn't,
right.
We don't have any regulation over them.
Right. Aside from
alcohol, if they want to deliver margaritas with their meal, they can do that whether we say yes or no.
Right. The state regulations that or the state emergency orders have been regardless of our beer permit or whatever our beer ordinance says. Those restaurants that have those TABC licenses can deliver margaritas or beer or whatever they can serve legally in the restaurant. They can deliver to your home. And that, if the state acts and if the governor acts to continue that executive order, that would continue regardless of what you do with the beer ordinance.
I just didn't want to leave anyone out. I mean, I think that it's something that we should do, and I just wanted to make sure that we were not leaving anyone out that would be, that just thinking of everyone in the city and make sure that I think we're going to still continue to see the takeout and the delivery and going forward. And so I just want to make sure we're not leaving anyone out.
So Danielle, are we not leaving anyone out? Is everyone included?
Well, right now, everyone would have the ability to deliver beer if you pass an ordinance allowing for our beer permit holders to deliver beer.
Mm-hmm.
That's while Governor Lee's executive orders are in effect as far as TABC license holders go. But I guess what I'm saying is that we can't help those TABC license holders if the state does not think that they should be delivering beer. Right now, the state does think that they should have that delivery power, but we don't have regulatory power over those TABC license holders. So all we can really do is do the work we can do for our beer permit holders.
And so to include our beer permit holders, we need to pass this action.
Yes. Right now, the people who just have a beer permit are unable to deliver. And so if you want to provide them with that delivery ability, you would need to take some kind of action. And what we've been asked to do is take a permanent action in that direction.
And it's not tied to food.
Well, a lot of those beer permit holders don't have a food component.
Correct. So it can't
be
tied to food. It's just tied to the beer.
Right.
If they provided a food ornament or food element as far as their business plan, they would be good to go right now, as long as the governor's order is in effect. But essentially, and I think what Danielle is saying is, we can only govern those entities of which we have the statutory authority to deal with.
Right. And so this would give us that statutory authority.
Well, it would extend to those permit holders, whether it's on premises, off premises manufacturer, or dual permit. It would allow them to deliver beer without a food element. And right now they can't deliver at all. And I think Johnson City has recognized this also and has taken those measures, or in the process of approving an ordinance that would allow those businesses to compete essentially and be successful with the home delivery that others are enjoying now.
So do you think this will extend beyond the state of emergency?
That would be up to the governor as far as the other businesses are concerned.
What we're being asked to do as a city is extend something beyond the state of emergency. It would be to make a permanent change to the ordinance to allow for delivery regardless of whether there's a pandemic going on.
Right. So this would be doing it on a permanent basis. That's
right.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
I'm good with that.
Me too.
All right.
And do you guys have any
coming out of the pandemic?
Are there any concerns or thoughts about how to limit the ordinance in terms of some of the considerations that I raised in the memo were, at a minimum, I think you're going to have the ordinance require that somebody has to show an ID, a photo ID with their age. If somebody's intoxicated, you would not deliver to them accurate records. But would you be interested in including any kind of limitation on how much beer could be delivered? This is similar to when we did the dual permit. I believe we limited to 64 ounces, which is a gallon, if I'm not mistaken, and we could have a similar limitation in delivery ordinance.
Margaret led the charge on that. Didn't you, Margaret, about the 64 ounces? You were all about the 64 ounces, but it depends on, what if you have a lot of people there?
Yeah, I don't think we want to put in, if we're delivering this, we're delivering it to the home.
Why don't we see if anybody else has if there's any other experiences anywhere else?
I remember Margaret saying it should be unlimited.
Well, I just remember she was all about the 64 ounces, a growler.
I thought she said at least 64 ounces the way I heard it.
Oh, that's my Louisiana roots, okay? South Louisiana, it matters.
Because I think if we get into, we say that you can only deliver 64 ounces. So are we going to say, is that within a 24-hour period, or could they make numerous deliveries of 64 ounces to the same address? And you start getting into all of that. I don't think that it's going to be an issue. And if they do have a bunch of people, then so be it. But
I just think it should be unmentioned.
What's that?
I just don't think it should be mentioned. Just leave it, up to the.
This is another one of those situations where it's evolving. We put it out there and we see what has to follow up. There will be a follow-up, I'm sure, as to how it has to be amended or retweaked. We spend a lot of our time retweaking, but I mean,
Okay, I don't think Johnson City, and so far Johnson City is the only other city that I've found that's doing this, but I can reach out and ask if any other cities are considering this, see whether they've got any. But I don't think Johnson City had any kind of limit on how much could be delivered. Just reading over their regulations.
Yeah, I think you would do the normal things that you would do if you were going in and have a beer in a restaurant. I mean, you're going to check IDs. You're going to, not serve to anyone that's inebriated. So I think this should follow those guidelines as well.
Okay. Well, I think that's enough guidance to be able to bring you guys something at the next work session. And in the meantime, we'll take it to the beer board. We'll take an actual ordinance to the beer board for them to look at and get their feedback, and then we can bring something to you next month.
Very good. Any more comments? If not, we'll move on to the next agenda item, Mr. Soar.
Yes, Mayor, we have Jim Bean with us. He's Director of Sullivan County Emergency Management Agency. And as a way of background, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, requires all local governments to prepare a multi-hazard mitigation plan. And this is designed to reduce the long-term risk to people and property from natural and man-made hazards. Sullivan County and its political subdivisions originally did a joint hazard mitigation plan in 2005. And the mitigation plan is to be reviewed and updated on a 5-year basis. It was last updated in August of 2015. And Jim's going to discuss with you today the process that has been ongoing since the first of the year, with participation from county representatives and representatives from both cities, as well as the town of Bluff City, and the recommendations for amending the current plan. If there are no objections, then that plan will be on your agenda for a formal consideration by resolution at your October 6th meeting. The plan does require that all the governing bodies in Sullivan County approve it by resolution. Jim?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Just to let you know, if you've got it, Mr. Zora said, we have been working on it this year with all the cities and the town of Bluff City and the county working together to update this plan. And you should have a copy of it, I believe, access to it, as well as once that plan was developed, within that plan, each political subdivision comes up with a potential projects that we could work on throughout this 5-year process, and categorized in flooding, severe weather / tornadoes, winter weather, wildfire, and even drought situations. And so each one of the cities in the county did that, and kind of listed a few projects that we could apply for if desired to move forward. They can be changed at any time, even as late as 4 years from now. But the biggest thing about the plan is it was submitted to the state Tennessee Emergency Management Agency and forwarded on to FEMA, who have sent a letter back, and I believe I may have sent that to Mr. Zora also, that shows the conditional acceptance of the plan by FEMA once it's adopted by each of the subdivisions by resolution. So that's what we're doing. What I'm doing here today is to answer any questions. The thing about the hazard mitigation grant is if we had a disaster that comes up and we have not got an acceptable plan, then we can get reimbursement for things such as in the first couple of categories of a disaster for debris removal and emergency services. But anything after that, which is categorized by damage to parks, damage to buildings, or things like that, they would require hazard mitigation plan be in place and accepted before those grants can be accepted. Some of the other items, there are pre-disaster mitigation projects. If you decide to, maybe you've got a property that is flooding severely, and we want to do some type of buyout, and then maybe convert it to. I've seen some areas convert it to a city park rather than continue to flood that area. Those type of grants, those are pre-disaster mitigation grants, or PDMs. They require hazard mitigation grant be accepted also. So now, if there's a disaster and someone wants to apply for individual assistance, whether we've got a plan or not doesn't affect the citizens. They can submit for that damage. So, any questions that anyone has, I'm free to ask.
Jim, I appreciate. I know you're in the field. I appreciate you participating in today's meeting. I know you're on a call, so to speak.
Yeah. I'm kind of sitting in the truck, trying to keep the sun out of the camera here, out of my eyes, though. But
well, I appreciate you you being with us today and reviewing this for council.
Not a problem.
Thanks, Jim.
I'll just say thanks, and thanks for everything. Jim's been on the team for the health department and the response and everything else. And plans are critical. We know that's valued a lot by our council, and our city is planning. So appreciate the work that it takes to create one and follow it and to update it. So thanks.
You're very welcome.
Okay, if no other comments, we'll move on to city manager's comments.
It's just 2 or 3 items, and I will be very brief as we're approaching the 3-hour mark. I would like to get some direction from City Council regarding, we do have the ability to, in the month of October, continue to conduct meetings as we have the last several months. In other words, we can have an electronic meeting on October the 6th for our business meeting. We can also have an electronic meeting on October 22nd. They can also be hybrid meetings, I think, if under the governor's order, executive order number 60. So just getting some direction. It does sunset as of now at the end of October. And we'll see, as we have in other executive orders, we'll see how far this goes. But just trying to get some direction from council so we can properly advertise those meetings.
Okay, council's desires.
I will be meeting electronically in October, the October 4th, if that's a possibility.
I would like to meet electronically during the month of October for both meetings, assuming we don't have breaking news on something very positive. I mean, I think we have to wait till this time in October at that meeting to decide what the governor's done. And so I would agree to meet for both of our meetings electronically in October is my thought.
I'm good with electronic.
I'm okay.
I do look forward to getting back, particularly to our work sessions in person, and also our regular meetings to be able to recognize folks, et cetera. So I look forward to that sometime in the future, but I think with flu season, et cetera, if we can continue to reduce exposure, it's a good idea. Sorry, Vince.
Oh, no. Either one. I'm fine either way.
Yeah, me as well. So,
all right, and that brings us really to the next meeting or the next item. And Councilwoman Firerobin mentioned getting together and recognize individuals. October has been our traditional month for having our annual boards and commission members reception. I think it would be ill-advised to try to do that in October. So if you wanted to postpone it to later, in a post-COVID era, or I know we've talked with our community relations staff about a letter and maybe a gift or something of that nature, if you wanted to go ahead and recognize them now and move forward with that type of recognition during our traditional month.
I like the idea of the letter. Right now, we've got so many things that we will push out, but I think, to just deal with things as we need to, as we come upon them, and to just keep moving in a timely fashion in this year, in this time, because we could end up moving so many things out into the future that we can never really catch up.
But not do a reception. So if at this point it could be just skip it this year, but we can see what happens. If we are so excited about everything, we could schedule something in the spring. But
yeah.
And then Lee, you're saying a letter, and I would say we don't need to do a gift, but if we've got a lot of our bling, that's fun.
That's what we're thinking in terms.
I think that could be fun, and I would give it in the month of October, distribute it at the meetings, not mail it. Save the post. Well, maybe not.
The meetings are virtual.
Oh, the meetings are virtual. That's true. So mail it. Yes, go ahead. Sounds good.
Yeah, not plan to meet, but I think to follow staff's recommendation would be great.
Yeah. Bling is good.
You would say that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Thanks, Sam. The last item then is Councilwoman Powers. If you can send me your notes that you used in the conversation with our network staff, and then we as a staff will draft up correspondence. And I'd like for all 5 of you all to see it. And then weigh in on are we drafting what you all as a group want to say, and we'd probably have it much like the resolution that you saw earlier today from the school system. We may have it where all 5 of you sign it and send that on then to the networks board. We'll do this pretty quickly so that we can get this. This can be a discussion item at the networks board meeting, which will be the second Wednesday in October. So that's around 14th, 15th, something like that. That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay, council comments.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that Margaret and I attended a virtual meeting last week with the school system pertaining to AP testing and funding for that. The school system did a really good, thorough job, I felt, in presenting the importance of that. And I'd like to encourage us to move forward and fund that. So the Industrial Development Board in our last meeting had many questions, and this was predominantly attended by the Industrial Development Board. But there may have been another council member there. I think it was just me and Margaret.
I think Malin.
I was on there.
Malin too.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Malin. Yes.
Right.
But anyway, I felt it was a good meeting. I did have to had a meeting to go into at 2:00, so I didn't catch some of the question and answer portion of that. But I thought it was very helpful for the Industrial Development Board to know where that funding amount, why it's going there, answer some questions about the trends over the past several years, things of that nature. So I'd encourage us to move forward with that. The other thing I was going to ask is we've had a little bit of correspondence with Discover Bristol about funding and some back and forth. Well, let me say this. We've had a response for them, maybe a couple of responses for them about how they felt about our funding model and reorganization of the board was moving forward. In talks with Bill Hartley, they are going to be discussing tonight a specific percentage. I think they are moving to a specific percentage of their revenues, their lodging revenues, to go towards Discover Bristol. And I know I think from most of our respect, at least for me, we kind of want to see what Bristol, Virginia is doing before we chime in. The only thing I would like to do is maybe just ask Bill or somebody from the staff to contact Discover Bristol and the chamber and let them know that we're kind of waiting to see what's going on in Bristol, Virginia. And then after Bristol, Virginia, determines what they're specifically going to do, I'd like to put it on our agenda to discuss what they're doing and how we fit into that. And then maybe a meeting thereafter of the two councils and Discover Bristol. Just wanted to see if anybody else had any other thoughts towards that.
I think at this time, I would just like to see, we put our appropriations agreement out there, and that we just see what happens. And that I think it's important at this point that we just wait and see what happens all the way around. And, there's been communication back and forth. I know, Danielle, you were in communication, and I think everybody's questions have been clarified. And so I think the ball pretty much is out there, and that now we give everyone an opportunity to act as they deem appropriate. And then once Bristol, Virginia meets or whatever, then we can go maybe from there. But I would just rather let it play out organically, as we have already made our appropriations agreement known.
Has that been signed yet?
No, it is not.
So Chad, I'm kind of in between. I'd say keep it on our agenda and talk about it next month and see where things are. And whether we want to be more proactive, because at some point, if it looks like we need to do some things differently, we need some lead time to do some things differently. So I think.
And the only thing I was alluding to is let's see what Bristol, Virginia does. It's on their agenda tonight to discuss. Let's see what they come up with, and make sure that they're firm in what they're doing, and then we can look at that ourselves. And that's the time period I think we may want to look at it, and later on we can discuss it all together. My main thing right now is we've had a couple of I think they've had a couple of written correspondence, and I don't know. I know I haven't responded. I have asked if there's been, any further correspondence, but to my knowledge, I don't think anyone has given any correspondence. And I think just a light note to Beth, maybe to say we're kind of on the sidelines waiting to see what happens, in Bristol, Virginia, and see if there's any further responses from the Discover Bristol board, just to let them know that we are monitoring the situation.
Mr. Sword, you want to address it?
No, I've sent the appropriation agreement to Beth on 2 different occasions. I think the former chair of the board had some communications with Mayor Luttrell. I think the attorney representing the Chamber of Commerce has contacted Danielle, and they've had a conversation regarding the interpretation of the appropriation agreement. She summarized their conversation and her response in an email, and I forwarded that email to each of you. And we have not had an executed appropriation agreement returned, nor any additional conversation.
Yeah, I agree with Councilwoman Powers that we just see what happens here next few weeks.
Is that it for Chad?
That's all I wanted to mention. I just wanted to give the courtesy that we're monitoring things and that we're moving forward. But I think if that's the way we want to do it, that's the way we want to do it.
Yeah. I think we've extended out, very extensively with him, and the ball's in their court, actually.
So for my update, I just want to remind everybody that the census is winding up. So just encouraging, we'll see how it ends up, but it's critical for all our economic development and everything else that we get a good response. So I think.
Do we know what our percentages are, Margaret? Do you know, or John?
Does John might. I think the self-response was in the 63-65%.
That's what I remember also.
And I don't know that we've gotten any other percentage update since they've been doing the door-to-door.
And that's pretty much consistent with Sullivan County and Kingsport. They might be a percentage higher than us, but we're in that 60.
Elizabethton was doing really good, really well. John, did you have something more?
I was just going to say I can check that they've changed the website that they had been formerly reporting those response rates on. So I'm checking to see where the newest information is.
Also, the other thing I'll add is that Rusty Barnett, mayor of Carter County, who had heart surgery and then passed away after that. So, and I've enjoyed working with him, First Tennessee Development District, et cetera. So very sorry to see that happen. And their retired fire chief on the same day. So that's a lot. So.
No, I don't have anything.
I don't either.
Yeah, I think we had a good meeting today. I think we've got a lot accomplished, and looks like we're moving forward again with a lot of things and some great, exciting opportunities.
I do have one question I don't want to beat a dead horse, but is there a date on that agreement with Discover Bristol? The fact if it's not signed and back to us by a certain date, then it's null and void, or?
No, there's if you recall, if they sign the agreement, then there's a commitment to $75,000 for Discover Bristol. If by September 30th, and we're obviously at the end of that, there is a reorganization of the governing board to include representation from City Council, and there was a total restructuring of the governance of the CVB. If there was an agreement to do that by September 30th, then that increased the amount paid to Discover Bristol from $75,000 paid on an annual basis in quarterly installments to 50% of the lodging or occupancy tax up to $400,000.
I think it was 40%.
Excuse me, 40%. I'm sorry, 40% of the occupancy tax up to $400,000. But there's no the agreement does not in and of itself sunset absent a signature, but there are no funds that transfer absent a signature.
So after September 30th, if an agreement has not been made, then they will not receive any funding.
No. The $75,000 is the commitment to the installment. The agreement has to be signed in order for that to happen, and that means they have to agree to the terms in the agreement. Now, there was also the condition in the agreement that if by September 30th there had been a reorganization of the board formalized, then that $75,000 would increase to 40% of the occupancy tax up to a maximum of $400,000.
But that's what I'm saying. No signed agreement, no money.
No signed agreement, no money.
But they don't have to sign. I mean, if they just signed and they didn't do anything else,
they get money.
Signed, they get $75,000.
That is correct. That is correct. That is correct.
But they haven't signed.
They have not signed.
It's a week away, week and a day. Just update on the census. John looked it up, and our self, and everybody can read it, but self-response for us is 66.2. The state is 65.4, so that's pretty close. And then overall, we've had in state of Tennessee, it's 96%, 96.2% as a whole. That sounds pretty good. I don't know what the our normal is. So if that's pretty close, but that looks pretty good, especially when you look at the self-response rate of 66, and we've taken it up to 94 or 96. So that's great. Thank you. Thanks, John.
I'm just going to beat that dead horse one more time. I'm going to ask our other council members that if Bristol, Virginia, in their discussions come up with an agreement tonight, and we have not had a chance to meet and talk about this, consider continuing the $75,000 funding in the quarterly installments one more quarter to give adequate time for us all to meet and see if we can get this worked out. They still have payroll to meet, and they still have other obligations. And so I think for us not to give anything with it still up in the air, conditions of COVID, I think are difficult. I'd ask for consideration of that.
So Chad, I think they can ask for that.
Let me point out that the September 30th date only applies to the reorganization.
Right.
Only applies to the reorganization. In order to get the $75,000, the appropriation agreement must be executed. And then there are terms and conditions that were set forth in there, such as an audit has to be produced. And then, as you recall, council asked all of our boards and commissions in which we provide funding support to provide a monthly update of council as to their financial, basically where they are in their finances to date for that particular organization. So there are those conditions are in there, but there's not a sunset on the agreement. There is a sunset on the reorganization and the opportunity to expand that 75,000 beyond the current level.
So what you're saying is
but there's also in that agreement stipulations along with that as to how some of those monies are to be appropriated.
That's correct.
And so in signing the agreement, they will agree to those appropriations of funding along with the other. And I think it sounds like there may be some type of a misunderstanding. Mr. Soros, correct me if I'm wrong, but haven't you made over the course of this appropriations agreement being offered, and let's be clear that it's an appropriations agreement, that it is a benevolent gift. And it's my understanding that Mr. Sora in his conversations and Ms. Smith in hers have made us available to answer questions or to do the things that they may have been interested in doing. And Bristol, Virginia has had the same opportunity to reach out to us prior to now. And as a matter of fact, we had established our joint council meetings that of course ended with COVID, but I just want to be sure that we're being fair to our own staff and to our own council in that we have made ourselves available and to both Bristol, Virginia and the Chamber and the CBB over a period of 2.5, almost 3 months now. I just want to be sure that we have a clear understanding that it's not that we haven't been available. We have.
I guess I may have misunderstood then. The appropriations agreement is for $75,000 per year, paid quarterly. Then there's another aspect to the agreement or another agreement about the reorganization?
No, there's only one agreement, but there are elements of that agreement. The first is that there will be a $75,000 annual contribution to Discover Bristol. The second element to it is that if there is a reorganization of the board consistent with how it's detailed in the appropriation agreement by September 30th, then that 75,000 would increase, consistent with 40% of the occupancy tax. There are other conditions in there. Some were placed this year by council when there was the ask that there would be a monthly financial statement prepared and delivered to council. There has always been a requirement that an audit be shared on their latest audit be provided to city council. There was also an element in this appropriation agreement which removed the ability to use a percentage of the funding to cover overhead expenses for a period of 3 years. That was also in the appropriation agreement. So that's those are the basic tenets that were in this, but it is only one agreement.
Okay.
Anything
Right.
else? Okay, no other comments or questions. We'll call this meeting adjourned.